Meng Chao jolted awake in class, glanced at the blackboard, and felt his world shatter on the spot. 50-day countdown to the high school graduation exam. Meng Chao has been reborn. Back to the eve of the graduation exam? Taking the high school graduation exam again? He'd rather be dead. Just as he was forced to stand in the crouching dragon stance as punishment, a cluster of strange fire and lightning-like flames exploded before his eyes. Ding! Willpower check passed. The Kindling system bound. Hope-bearer, Meng Chao. Initial contribution points, 10,000. Not only did it instantly heal all his internal injuries, but it also unlocked a list of god-tier skills. As long as he contributes to civilization, he can earn contribution points for exchanges. In his past life, Dragon City was destroyed, and we were as lowly as ants. In this life with the Kindling, I will change the fate of Dragon City's destruction and, more importantly, my own destiny. Since the otherworld gods and demons want to extinguish civilization, then turn them all into burning fuel. Remember, in this world, only we Earthlings are the most brutal.
The scorching afternoon sun baked the earth. At Dragon City No. 9 Middle School, Grade 12 Class 6, the classroom was as sweltering as a steamer and the students were all drowsy. The teacher brandished an alloy battle saber in one hand and gripped a hideous specimen in the other, screaming at the top of his lungs on the podium. "Look at me! Quick, look at me! If you don't look at me, how will you know what monsters look like?" In the back row of the classroom, a boy with messy hair suddenly woke up and let out a scream. Both the students and the teacher were startled. "Meng Chao?" Deep red sleep marks remained on Meng Chao's face, and his expression was filled with panic, as if he had just woken from a long nightmare. He scratched his hair and looked around, his dazed eyes suddenly freezing when they hit the blackboard. It was covered with dense saber technique insights, torque analysis of the battle saber, speed, angle, and depth of the blade, the maximum strength of monster carapaces, and various complex formulas, all mandatory questions for the high school graduation exam. 2 giant lines of text loomed. 50 days to the high school graduation exam. Study hard and make progress every day. Glorify our planet and dominate the other world. Is this my high school classroom? Meng Chao's mind was in a daze. Didn't I die? How did I return to my senior year right before the high school graduation exam? This is even worse than death. In an instant, a splitting headache set in, and countless memory fragments rushed into his mind like a torrential flood. What? Dragon City fell? I failed the high school graduation exam and was battered by society for decades, only to end up as a third-rate expert? But my sister, with her extraordinary talent and the Night Devil bloodline, became the legendary Night Witch, one of the most terrifying boss-level powerhouses in the entire otherworld? Meow meow meow, what on earth is this development? Meng Chao was struck by lightning. He tried to recall the details, but the nightmare faded quickly, leaving only scattered flashbacks. In a daze, a familiar big black face leaned in. "Meng Chao, don't affect other students by sleeping in class." Meng Chao blurted out. "Teacher Yen, you're still alive?" The whole class was first met with dead silence, followed by an uproar. Everyone admired Meng Chao's death-seeking courage to the point of utter prostration. You must know that teacher Yen Dongxing, who taught this 100 battles saber technique class, was the feared Yen the Devil. It was said that back in the military, he was a famous iron-blooded instructor who killed monsters as easily as chopping dumpling filling. To dare to tease even Yen the Devil, he truly lives up to his reputation as the former number 1 tough guy of Class 6. "Meng Chao, we will give you a grand burial." Tears of sympathy rolled down the students' faces as teacher Yen Dongxing's face, usually as black as the bottom of a pot, instantly turned beet red. "Student Meng Chao, care to explain?" He gripped the monster's skull specimen, his voice calm yet hiding a lethal intent. "This is bad." Meng Chao's pupils contracted. At this moment, his perception of killing intent was 10 times that of his classmates. Stimulated by this lethal aura, he quickly snapped back to reality. "Sorry, Teacher Yen, I was too exhausted from studying last night and dozed off. I had a nightmare." Meng Chao struggled to capture the flashbacks in his mind and said uncertainty. "I seem to dream of overwhelming otherworld creatures, specifically the cruel and howling kind, swarming toward Dragon City like a flood. We couldn't stop them, and our century-old home was destroyed. I woke up in terror. And then, Teacher Yen, you were incredibly heroic in my dream, a martyr revered by everyone. I was just deeply mourning your memory, and when I opened my eyes and saw you walking over, I was so overcome with joy that I couldn't help myself." "Wait a second." Yen Dongxing raised his eyebrows. "So in your dream, Dragon City fell, and I died as well?" He wore a faint mocking smile. The monster's skull creaked and groaned under the tightening pressure of his grip. This? Meng Chao scratched his head. Having just returned from the nightmare, his survival instinct was in overdrive. Rest assured, teacher, you died peacefully without a hint of pain. Meng Chao wasn't lying. He vaguely remembered Yen the devil being devoured by a 100-toothed giant maggot. It was torn to shreds in just 2 or 3 seconds. He didn't even have time to let out a scream. So, there shouldn't have been any pain, right? Crack! Yen Dongxing crushed the monster's skull with a single hand. Dragon City will fall? That's simply laughable. Stand against the wall. Head up, chest out, stomach in, and stick your butt out. Meng Chao looked troubled. Teacher Yen, how am I supposed to stick my butt out while standing against the wall? What? Meng Chao felt a jolt, instantly finding the feeling of being 17 again. He stuck his butt out, his face filled with determination. The iron-blooded instructor was fuming, his eyes bulging wider than a monster's. I won't mention your usual slacking off, and I can't be bothered to care about you sleeping in class, but student Meng Chao, just what is in your head for you to dream about the destruction of Dragon City? Tell me loudly. 50 years ago, when our Dragon City crossed over to this other world, there was no coal, no oil, no electricity, nothing at all. There were only plagues and zombies everywhere. Back then, did Dragon City perish, sir? Dragon City did not perish. After the zombie crisis, the fog descended, and monsters appeared. Countless martyrs sacrificed their blood to carve out survival space inch by inch from between the monster's teeth. Yen Dongxing continued to roar. In just the first 10 years of the monster war, we lost a third of our population. At the most tragic point, monsters broke into the city center every day, and humans fought them in every shopping mall, every residential community, and every single bathroom. Tell me, did we yield? Did Dragon City perish? Sir, we did not yield, and Dragon City did not perish. Facing the spray of the iron-blooded instructor's spit, Meng Chao looked as though he were ready to die for the cause. Yen Dongxing's anger subsided slightly as he said solemnly, "Very good. Whether it was the crossing, the zombie outbreaks, or the monster invasions, the crises that failed to destroy us only made us stronger. After half a century of struggle, today's Dragon City has secured its footing in this other world. Compared to when we first arrived, our territory has tripled, and our population has quintupled. Many citizens have reached the level of elite special forces and Olympic champions, and the 1 in 100 superhumans possess even more staggering combat power. We have upgraded ancient martial arts, restored powerful industries, and unlocked brand new technologies. Dragon City's cavalry remains vigilant every night. Once the fog lifts, our steel torrent will sweep down like tigers from a mountain, spreading the radiance of Earth's civilization across this entire world. How could such a Dragon City be destroyed by mere otherworld creatures? And they're supposed to be brutal? Let me tell you, in this world, only we Earthlings are the most brutal." The iron-blooded instructor couldn't help but curse. The students were fired up, their blood boiling with excitement. Monitor Zhuahaoran stood up. He had sharp brows and bright eyes, a tall and straight figure, and lived up to his name with a natural aura of righteousness. He glanced at Meng Chao and said solemnly, "Teacher Yen, that was brilliantly said. The long night has passed, and ahead lies the dawn of victory. Growing up in such a radiant era, today's youth should study hard and cultivate diligently, striving to become superhumans and contributing their strength to the rise of Dragon City in this other world. How can we be terrified of the enemy like tigers and spend all day obsessing over the destruction of Dragon City? Of course, I believe those as timid as mice are ultimately a tiny minority. The majority of us share the same conviction. Dragon City will win. Earth will win. Civilization will win." Led by the monitor, the students grew ecstatic. Dragon City will win. Earth will win. Civilization will win. Everyone pumped their fists and shouted, wishing they could drop their pens right now to join the army and sweep across the other world. The monitor is so handsome. Many girls cast admiring glances at Zhuahaoran. In sharp contrast, their looks toward Meng Chao naturally became strange. Some whispered in discussion, "Meng Chao really has fallen into a slump lately, always sleeping in class. You can't really blame him. His cultivation went wrong and he was seriously injured. Going from first in the class to the very bottom, who wouldn't feel dejected? Still, he shouldn't be cursing Dragon City to its doom. Holy crap, he's looking for trouble." Meng Chao narrowed his eyes, thinking to himself, "Do I have a grudge against you? Come to think of it, wait, I really do have a grudge." Monitor Zhuahaoran was exactly Meng Chao's arch-rival during high school. Staring at that handsome yet self-righteous pretty boy, Meng Chao's head throbbed as memory fragments came in waves. Scenes flashed quickly before his eyes. Meng Chao realized with a shock that in his nightmare just now, his failure in the high school graduation exam seemed to have something to do with the monitor. While Meng Chao failed the exam, the monitor got into a prestigious university and soon became a superhuman, soaring to greatness. But this spineless coward is a complete hypocrite and a true lowlife. When Dragon City was sweeping across the other world and winning every battle, Zhuhao rode the wave, gaining a halo of heroism, receiving heaps of flowers and glory. At high school class reunions, 7 or 8 girls would swarm him like wolves. Meng Chao was a man with a strong sense of justice. On the spot he was envious, no, disgusted to the core. However, when Dragon City encountered a real otherworld civilization and fell into a bitter struggle, this guy actually deserted, causing the entire front line to collapse. Sentenced by the military tribunal, Zhuhao decided to go all the way. He simply betrayed Dragon City, defected to the alien races, and sold out Earth's secrets. A traitor acting all high and mighty? Who's really terrified of the enemy like a tiger? At least I fought until the very last moment and perished with Dragon City. You little punk. First you sabotage my high school graduation exam, then you act like a lowlife at the class reunion, and finally you betray Dragon City? I'll make you wish you were dead. Like an instinct, combat plans swirled in Meng Chao's mind. He took half a step forward, and Zhuhao subconsciously tensed up in alarm. The monitor spoke so well. I am truly educated and deeply moved. Meng Chao said with a face full of humble bragging sincerity, even giving a slight bow. Thank you, Teacher Yen and Monitor, for your guidance. I have deeply realized my mistakes. I will change. From now on, I will stand firm and cultivate hard for the rise of Dragon City in the other world, to contribute all my strength. Talk is cheap, watch my actions. Zhuhao shuddered. He felt Meng Chao's gaze had suddenly become eerie, a complete departure from the person he was before class. Enough, Monitor. Sit down. Let's continue the lesson. Teacher Yen didn't waste words and pointed Meng Chao to the corner. Be self-aware. Crouching dragon stance, Zhilong stake. Stay like that until class is over. The words crouching dragon stance triggered a chorus of gasps. In Dragon City's compulsory education system from kindergarten to high school, there are the 9 great stakes: 3 lying, 3 sitting, and 3 standing. Combined with breathing and meditation, they allow one to absorb spiritual energy, stimulate cell activity, break gene shackles, and step onto the path of transcendence. The crouching dragon stance, however, is the 10th stake technique beyond the syllabus and the hardest one to practice. Forget high school, even many vocational colleges don't teach it. Only the legendary undergraduate programs, sacred grounds for training superhumans, practice this stance. It requires the legs to be stretched extremely wide and the spine to twist like a venomous snake, brewing a half-exposed spirit. It's like a hungry, highly aggressive snake waking from hibernation. At number 9 middle school, even top students in the rocket class, who can stand for over 10 minutes, are rare, and their class 6 is just an ordinary parallel class. There's still half an hour until class ends. Everyone knew Meng Chao was injured in his junior year and hospitalized for months. Since his discharge, he had let himself go and never planned for undergraduate study. Even the basic 9 great stakes were mediocre for him. Standing in the crouching dragon stance for half an hour? He'd better prepare to crawl home after school. Many students felt a sense of shared sorrow, thinking Yen the devil was truly ruthless. Zhuhao crossed his arms and sat down with a cold sneer. Meng Chao obediently went to the corner to stand. The Zhilong stake seems like a very simple introductory stance. In my nightmare, it was phased out long ago. How exactly do you stand again? Meng Chao recalled, his mind still a bit muddled, unable to distinguish between dream and reality. A black sheep brings its own ruin. Zhuhao muttered to himself, his voice just loud enough to be heard by those around him. Before he could even finish, Meng Chao moved. Whoosh! Front leg bowed, back leg tensed. Both arms stretched out like spirit snakes. His spine resembled a flood dragon just awakening from the abyss, poised and ready for the spring thunder. Meng Chao's spirit erupted like a mountain torrent, beyond his own control. This? The students were dumbstruck. Meng Chao seemed reborn, a completely transformed person. The rhythm of his muscles, bones and limbs radiated composure and absolute confidence. Simply standing there, he lacked even a hint of high school awkwardness. His posture wasn't standard, but it was more beautiful and lethal than any Zhilong stake they had seen. Even his fingertips trembled slightly, emitting a faint, flickering killing intent. Holy crap, Is Meng Chao's Zhilong steak really this strong? He's arguably even better than the monitor. It's an illusion. He's putting his life on the line just to showboat. Just wait, 1 minute tops and he'll collapse. A minute passed. Meng Chao remained completely at ease, looking as though he could hold the stance until the late-night study session. Suddenly, as if struck by a thought, he spoke with a face full of humble bragging apology. Teacher Yen, is something wrong? Is my posture not standard enough? I'm so sorry. I haven't practiced in a while, and my movements are a bit off. I'll definitely fix it when I get home. Please bear with me. Yen Dongxing opened his mouth but stopped. His dark face went through a kaleidoscope of expressions before he returned to the podium in silence. The students, however, were screaming curses in their hearts. Is this beast Meng Chao even speaking a human language? If your Zhilong steak is off, then what are we? Earthworms. Was it an illusion? Everyone felt that since Meng Chao woke up, both his skill in the steak stance and his showboating ability had skyrocketed. All eyes and pressure shifted back to Zhuohaoren. The monitor felt as though Meng Chao had delivered a resounding slap to his face. His expression was awkward, but a flicker of ferocity flashed in the depths of his eyes. Class, continue class. Yen Dongxing knocked on the blackboard. 100 Battles Saber Technique and Thunder Cross Sword are the two most important cold weapon combat skills in high school. Last year's final big question on the high school graduation exam was about Thunder Cross Sword. This year, it's very likely the turn of the 100 Battles Saber Technique. Everyone, listen carefully to my analysis of the 7 advanced methods for the saber to cut through the gaps in monster carapaces. Yen Dongxing was a saber master and a gold medal teacher. It was said he had a senior brother who was a peerless expert on the high school graduation exam question-setting committee. For the past 3 years, Yen Dongxing had specifically taught senior year classes, and his rate of predicting exam questions was very high. Seeing the teacher reveal his special skills, everyone's spirits rose, and they forgot about Meng Chao. While standing in the crouching dragon stance, Zhilong steak, the lightning-like flame deep within Meng Chao's pupils grew brighter and brighter, releasing a slight sting. What on earth is this again? Meng Chao was astonished. A bundle of fire-like and electricity-like red spots of light floated in the upper left of his field of vision, as elusive as floaters. Others probably couldn't see it. Otherwise, a cluster of strange fire drifting around the classroom would have made everyone scream long ago. Moreover, it looked somewhat familiar. At the end of his nightmare, when Dragon City was being destroyed, he seemed to have seen this cluster of strange fire erupting from the city core. Now the strange fire accompanied Meng Chao back to his youth, then shattered into rows of mysterious and complex runes. Hundreds of runes jumped frantically, changing from worm-like odd characters to even odder ones, sounding like information from above the stars and deep space. After dozens of shifts, the information was translated into human language. Host has passed the mental and willpower check. Binding complete. The Seed of Hope. Host identity confirmed. The Hope-Bearer, Meng Chao, congratulations on becoming a Hope-Bearer of civilization. We hope you will do your best to spread the fire of civilization. Initial contribution point reward, 10,000. Detected, old hidden injuries in the Hope-Bearer's body. Not proficient in any basic skills. Automatically allocate initial contribution points to restore to optimal state. The Seed of Hope? Hope-Bearer? Making contributions? Contribution rewards? A Rebirth gift pack? Meng Chao was completely bewildered, but he subconsciously nodded. Yes. Consuming 1,000 contribution points. Redeeming basic restoration once. Healing progress, 10%. Consuming 1,010 contribution points. Redeeming basic restoration once. Healing progress, 19%. Consuming 1,025 contribution points. Redeeming basic restoration once. A series of messages flashed through Meng Chao's vision. Simultaneously, a wave of warmth flooded his body like a trickling stream, as gentle as the first buds of spring. My injuries. The hidden wounds from last year's cultivation error that even doctors were helpless against, they're actually healing. I can feel it. Those shattered tendons and meridians are all being reconnected. Meng Chao's eyes widened, so euphoric he wanted to burst into song. This feels amazing. Don't stop. Soon after the string of restoration alerts, a brand new message popped up. Consuming 3,500 contribution points. Redeeming the basic force exertion technique Mighty Bull technique, and upgrading to expert level. This is... Endless details of the Mighty Bull technique flooded Meng Chao's mind. Every muscle contortion, vascular twist, and the flow of neural currents through every acupuncture point. Complex formulas for bone strength and ergonomics, along with scientific cultivation methods, became clear. Flashbacks of him training in his nightmare turned into a torrent of information, surging into his motor nerves and brain cells to make him an instant expert. With a single thought, he could control every muscle to unleash a punch of supreme power. Amazing! Are legendary third-rate experts really this strong? Just as he reached a peak of euphoria, the sensation stopped abruptly. Don't stop now. I was just getting into it. Keep going. Seed of hope. Information flashed before his eyes. Basic skills are divided into 5 ranks: ordinary, expert, master, perfect, and ultimate. Upgrade occurs at 100% proficiency, accumulated through combat or redeemed with contribution points. Upgrade me like crazy. Do I look like someone who fusses over a few points? Current balance: 3 contribution points. Unable to redeem. Please accumulate more points. What? 10,000 points gone just like that? Fine, upgrade me to master level first. Can I give you an IOU? Fine, upgrade me to master level first. Can I give you an IOU? No. Then tell me how to earn more. The fire of civilization is eternal. The stronger the civilization, the stronger the hope-bearer. Please contribute to your civilization to unlock more power and missions. The starlight text vanished, reverting into a magnificent flame that ignored him entirely. Meng Chao messed around for a while but couldn't summon a manual or tutorial. Ring, ring, ring. Class dismissed. Teacher Yen cast a cold, expressionless glance at Meng Chao and left the classroom with his specimens. The students finally remembered Meng Chao was still standing as punishment. When they looked back, their mouths hung open in shock. Meng Chao actually lasted the whole time? A proper stance provides immense benefits for tempering one's spirit and will. At this moment, Meng Chao looked like a rusty sword that had been repolished, radiating a sharp, piercing aura. It was as if people were seeing him as he was before his injury in junior year. Facing the students' astonished gazes and whispers, Meng Chao looked utterly indifferent. The corners of his eyes and mouth twitched slightly. For some reason he was suddenly starving, so hungry his stomach felt scorched. He couldn't move a single step, and his vision was turning black. Oh no! Does the Seed of Hope require me to provide all the bioenergy needed for body repairs and skill awakening myself? Just as he was about to collapse, a great white bear came charging towards him. Meng Chao, how could you practice the crouching dragon stance to such a powerful level behind my back? The great white bear was a tigerback tank weighing over 200 pounds. His aggrieved expression and resentful voice gave everyone goosebumps. Meng Chao shuddered. This voice, which he wouldn't forget even if it were turned into ash, belonged to his high school best friend, Chu Feixiong. Who else could it be? Quick, Fatty Xiong. I forgot my wallet today. Treat me to a feast at the tuck shop, and I'll treat you twice in the next 2 days. No way. Buy one, get 2 back? My appetite is already 3 times yours. Since when did you become so generous, Meng Chao? There must be a catch. Would I ever lie to you? We're brothers from different parents. True. The whole class heard you, so I doubt you'll dare to back out. Let's go. To the tuck shop, it's on me today. 5 minutes later, at a corner of the school tuck shop, the great white bear was crying like a 200-pound child. Meng Chao, for the love of God, be a human. You're an animal. You just ate 2 weeks' worth of my allowance in one breath. I'll fight you. He lunged at Meng Chao ferociously. Don't be like that. Meng Chao peeled his last chocolate bar and casually swung his arm. Mighty Bull technique, activate. The 200-pound great white bear was sent flying. The two stared at each other in total confusion. Just now, Chu Feixiong was dazed and dizzy. It was a hallucination. Meng Chao remained deadpan, swallowing the chocolate while looking at the shelves unsatisfied. The instant noodles today look quite fresh too. Great color, aroma and taste. Get lost. I don't even have a cent left. Hurry up, class is starting. The great white bear fled in panic. Meng Chao was about to give chase when he noticed a white-haired janitor near the trash can who had accidentally spilled a huge bag of trash all over the floor. Ma'am, let me help you. Meng Chao reached out and picked up all the trash. Suddenly his eye twitched as information popped up: frowny face for helping others and promoting the integrity of Dragon City. Contribution points plus 0.001. For protecting the environment and promoting the sustainable development of Dragon City. Contribution points plus 0.001. Contribution points, is it really that simple? The information flashed and vanished, but Meng Chao stood frozen for a long time. Teaching building, stairwell. Meng Chao leans against the handrail, Head tilted back at a 45-degree angle, in a pensive pose, he gazes deeply at the girls in short skirts walking up the stairs, laughing and chatting. Their calves, round and smooth, tremble slightly beneath their knee-high white cotton socks. Are you looking for death? The great white bear Chu Feixiong yanks him from behind. If you really want to look, just pretend you're not interested and steal a few glances. How can you stare at them so fixedly? You're such a rogue. Fat bear, you don't understand. A layer of vicissitudes clouds Meng Chao's eyes as he laments with a hint of humble bragging. Only at this moment do I realize that the life we once took for granted is actually so beautiful, worth sacrificing everything to protect. Meng Chao, I truly admire you. Every time, your showboating is so fresh and refined. Chu Feixiong pulls him aside. Stop looking. If you want, I can lend you the latest study materials I downloaded. Let's talk. Did you really kill Demon Yen in your dream and bring Dragon City to its ruin? And what about me? Did I become a great general and fight until the final moment? This great white bear had harbored a dream since childhood, to become a majestic great general, commanding Dragon City's iron torrent to sweep across the other world. Of course, this was the dream of every Dragon City youth. What do you mean brought to its ruin? I only saw a few fragmented images. As for you. Meng Chao stared at his best friend's large face, searching the depths of his mind. Past life memories were like butterflies dancing in a storm. Mottled and elusive. The feeling of a hangover resurfaced. He couldn't capture clear details. Just as he was about to give up, a bolt of lightning suddenly illuminated his mind. Accompanied by a piercing headache, he saw it. Deep within the clouds, Meng Chao saw gargantuan monsters unlike anything ever seen before, resembling slowly moving hills grinding toward Dragon City. He saw countless soldiers and citizens charging forward like a surging tide, only to collapse and be crushed like water hitting a giant rock. Meng Chao jolted awake from the nightmare again. Clutching his chest, he slowly sat down on the steps, drenched in cold sweat. Even the girls running past, playing and chasing each other, could not divert his gaze. Meng Chao hesitated. What could he say? Should he tell his best friend that in the nightmare he never made it into military school, let alone became a general, but was merely a grunt on the front lines? That the monster war was about to escalate, with larger, more numerous, and even more ferocious beasts emerging incessantly? That Dragon City would suffer heavy losses in this battle, including Chu Feixiong? That countless soldiers and citizens would be sacrificed, and numerous powerhouses would fall? That they had preordained a destructive end before even leaving the newbie village? Even his mom and dad? Meng Chao didn't dare think further. This wasn't the future. It was just a damned nightmare. To change everything, he had to start with the high school graduation exam. Meng Chao snapped back to reality. Fat bear, remember? My dream was to get into an undergraduate program and become a transcendent, while yours was to enter military school and become a general. It was said that back in the Earth era, getting into an undergraduate program wasn't too difficult due to university expansion. But after Dragon City's traversal, faced with resource scarcity and various crises at the brink of survival, all citizens had to fulfill their duties. Youths also had to compress their education time to enter work and combat positions earlier. The ideal for ordinary citizens was to get into a 2-year vocational college for professional training and find a good job. As for undergraduate programs, they only train transcendents. No matter now or in the future, transcendents are the pillars of Dragon City's dominance in the other world, and hold an exalted status, receiving deep respect from all citizens. Whether in politics or the military, whether as powerful tycoons or superstar celebrities in the spotlight, 9 out of 10 are transcendents. To shatter the horrific images seen in his nightmare, Meng Chao must become a transcendent. The great white bear Chu Feixiong extended his fist towards Meng Chao. It wasn't once upon a time, it was just yesterday that we both said it. Since you, this big idiot, have really made up your mind to go for a final 50-day sprint before the high school graduation exam, your buddy will definitely help you. Meng Chao took a deep breath and also extended his fist, bumping it heavily against Chu Feixiong's. Enter military school, become a general. Get into an undergraduate program, become a transcendent. The two brothers strode back to the classroom. A next period was literature class, and the students were jubilant. Great! We finally have literature class next. Quick, quick, quick. I want to recite the Ballad of Mulan. I want to recite Moonlight over the Lotus Pond, and I want to analyze the creative background and deep meaning of A Madman's Diary. I can't wait. Literature teacher? Where is our dear literature teacher? The students wait expectantly. Unfortunately, they didn't see the teacher. Instead, they were met by the icy face of the monitor, Zhuo. Teacher Huang is sick today. Zhuo stood on the podium and said, "This class is changed to self-study. Everyone, line up quickly and follow me to the cultivation room." "No way. Not this again. I want Teacher Huang. Give me back my literature class." The expected bad news triggered a burst of wailing. Dragon City is a lone force in a foreign land and implements an iron-blooded education system. From kindergarten to university, combat-focused physical education, cultivation classes, and fighting courses take up more than half of the schedule. Mathematics classes for calculating ballistics and sword trajectories, biology classes for studying monster structures, and physics and chemistry classes for refining crystals and otherworld minerals all carry significant weight. With limited time, literature classes, which cannot directly increase combat power, can only be repeatedly reduced. By now, high school students only have 2 literature classes a week. During the final sprint for the high school graduation exam, these 2 literature classes must give way to the main subjects. Thus, the literature teacher can only get sick or ask for leave every few days, giving the class time to the gym teacher or leaving it for self-study. Rarity makes things precious. These days, high school students are breathless under the weight of heavy cultivation. Everyone loves literature class more than words can say. It's heard that back in their ancestral home, Earth, peers could have 10 or 20 literature classes a week, recite hundreds of ancient poems, do several sets of literature exam papers daily, and write compositions of 2,000 or 3,000 words. On the contrary, physical education was optional. Those were such happy days. You can hide a literature paper and secretly enjoy it in the intervals of cultivation. Complaints aside, high school seniors have the awareness required for their grade level. The students could only slowly and reluctantly stand up. "Quick, quick, quick! Be nimble with your movements." Zhuo stood with his hands behind his back, shouting with considerable authority. In this era, the monitor has great power and must assist the teacher with many management tasks. "I really can't stand this kid's showboating." The great white bear curled his lip while lining up. "Zhuo is too shameless. His strength reached the standard of the rocket class long ago, yet he insists on staying in our ordinary class as the monitor. Do you know why?" "Why?" Meng Chao asked. Returning from the nightmare, his memories were chaotic, and many things remained a blur. The school has a rule. Since being the monitor takes up a student's time and energy, the school provides a certain amount of cultivation resources as compensation. It's an unwritten rule. And Zhuo's uncle happens to be the dean, the macaque, who naturally made sure everything was handled perfectly for his nephew. Chu Feixiong explained, his anger rising. "That guy's family owns a massive corporation. They've got the dean's connections and no shortage of gene medicines or monster materials. Yet he still insists on staying in the ordinary class as the monitor just to snatch resources from poor kids like us. There's truly no justice." Meng Chao remembered now. After his injury in the 10th grade, Chu Feixiong's strength in the class was indeed second only to Zhuo. If the dean hadn't opened the back door for him, Zhuo would have definitely moved to the rocket class. In Class 6, the great white bear would have had a great chance of becoming the monitor, gaining more resources and a better hope of getting into military school. No wonder he was so frustrated. "You two in the back, what are you whispering about? You're wasting everyone's time." The monitor's Zhuo shouted mercilessly after hearing them. Chu Feixiong's brows knitted as he prepared to step forward, and Meng Chao held him back. "Cultivation first. We have plenty of time ahead." The cultivation center was a 15-story building with over 40 specialized rooms for cultivation, restoration, and medical treatment. Its scale was 5 times that of the teaching building. Air was filled with the heat of youth, making one's blood boil upon entry. Since this was a self-study period, it was managed by the monitor while the teachers were away. At Zhuo's command, students rushed toward various cultivation equipment. The clanging of barbells, the low growls of exertion, the whistling of punches and whip kicks, and the heavy thuds against sandbags formed a passionate song of struggle. This scene was both familiar and strange. This scene made Meng Chao sigh. When humans discovered spirit energy, the super energy of the otherworld, they learned to introduce it into their bodies to strike cells and unlock genes. Ancient cultivation was thus given a whole new meaning. However, poor in literature, rich in martial arts, remained a universal truth. Children of elite families grew up on milk sourced from powerful mammalian monsters. As they grew, they consumed secret medicines daily, applied special ointments, and even bathed in monster blood. They had the support of gravity pods, medical pods, and neural stimulation pods, along with the guidance of senior experts and scientific cultivation plans. For these favored children, becoming a transcendent was practically a foregone conclusion. For a poor kid like Meng Chao, standing out was as difficult as reaching the heavens. Without sufficient resources, burying oneself in hard work was like running a marathon after 3 days of fasting. It was pure suicide. Strengthening through contributions sounds great, but earning only 0.001 contribution points each time I pick up trash means even contracting all the landfills in the city wouldn't be enough. I still have to cultivate tirelessly. Meng Chao threw himself onto the cultivation equipment after just 2 movements. He was gasping for air. He was still so hungry his body, repaired by the seed of hope and awakened by the mighty bull technique, was like a fully reinforced main battle tank. It consumed dozens of times more fuel than an ordinary car. His big idiot best friend's 2 weeks' worth of living expenses had barely filled the smallest gap. How could he possibly withstand high-intensity cultivation? What a pity! Several girls sighed in their hearts as they watched Meng Chao slumped over the equipment, looking frail and weak. Having just seen him maintain the crouching dragon stance, they vaguely recalled his brilliance during his first 2 years of high school. They wondered if his outward easygoingness hid a deep-seated unwillingness to accept his fate. Meng Chao once had a chance to become a transcendent, but now he's destined to be just another face in the crowd, they thought, unable to help but feel a surge of sympathy. Meng Chao, if you're going to train, then take it seriously. If not, get lost and stop hogging the equipment. The monitor, Swahowaran, barked, keeping a constant eye on him. This guy. The great white bear glared at the monitor, helped Meng Chao to a corner, and handed him a sports drink. Sit for a while and take it slow. I'm fine. Meng Chao shook his head, his sweat pouring like rain. Damn it, my physical condition is too poor. What have I been doing for the past year? The seed of hope can help me awaken skills, but it can't conjure power out of thin air. I need cultivation resources to fill my main battle tank with fuel. Meng Chao smiled bitterly. If he could have afforded resources, he wouldn't have spent a whole year in self-abandonment. You haven't trained for a year. You've probably even forgotten the basics of the mighty bull force, right? Chu Feixiong assumed Meng Chao was truly clueless and demonstrated the basic force exertion method with great vigor. Being a natural power type, his version of the mighty bull force was fierce and imposing. Meng Chao watched, his gaze revealing something peculiar. Chu Feixiong rubbed his head. Was it an illusion? He actually saw a hint of disdain in Meng Chao's eyes. Meng Chao, are you looking down on my training? The great white bear's face darkened. Force shouldn't be exerted that way. Meng Chao couldn't help but say. Chu Feixiong couldn't believe his ears. I treat you like a brother, and you're showboating to me? Don't misunderstand, I'm not targeting you, Meng Chao quickly explained. I'm saying that current force exertion methods are all garbage. Not exactly, but they are indeed a bit crude and not very scientific. This was beyond arrogant. The mighty bull force was a scientific force exertion method developed in year 35 of the new era by a research team led by the military expert Zhou Mang. They had studied the physiological structures of over a dozen level 3 monsters, such as the hammer beast and the savage horned beast. It integrated force exertion models of Olympic champions and mixed martial artists from the Earth era, undergoing 5 years of R&D in ergonomics labs. Its characteristics were being easy to understand, quick to learn, and extremely explosive. Besides stimulating blood and strengthening the body, it also triggered a massive secretion of growth hormones in teenagers and improved cell activity, offering great benefits for advanced cultivation. After over a decade of practice, it, along with the Ripple Force and the Dragon Snake Force, was designated by the Dragon City Education Bureau as one of the 3 mandatory force exertion methods for compulsory education. Yet Meng Chao claimed this set of methods was crude and unscientific? Brother, I think you've become exceptionally shameless this afternoon. Little did he know, Meng Chao wasn't boasting at all. War is the best means of communication between civilizations. When future Dragon City residents and other world powerhouses collided, their civilizations deeply penetrated each other. Humans utilized the wisdom of the other world to constantly improve Earth-originated industry, technology, and martial arts. Today's mighty bull force is only the first version. In the future, Through encounters with various bizarre otherworld creatures and deeper explorations of cells and genes through dissection, Dragon City's powerhouses will push the mighty bull force to its second, third, pro, and plus versions. The ultimate version of the mighty bull force not only increases the maximum output by 30%, but also fixes most of the bugs from previous versions where spirit energy would run wild in the blood vessels and neural networks. It shortens the muscle cooldown time after excessive expansion by 15%, greatly enhancing extreme punching power and combat endurance. By then, it is no longer just the Mighty Bull Force, but the higher-level Mighty Bull technique. Through the Seed of Hope, Meng Chao lit up his past life memories and awakened none other than the future's ultimate Mighty Bull technique. Let's go, follow me to the bathroom. Meng Chao's eyes flickered. They went up 2 floors and found the most secluded bathroom. Seeing no one around, Meng Chao stealthily opened a stall and signaled his best friend to enter. Meng Chao, what are you doing? The great white bear asked nervously. Don't be scared, take off your shirt and let me study your muscles. Meng Chao pulled and dragged his big idiot friend into the stall. Before the great white bear could scream, Meng Chao cut him off. Just now, when you were circulating the mighty bull force to your ribs, did you feel a faint, aching bloat? Like power was about to leak out. Chu Feixiong froze, clutching his ribs with a grim expression. Also, analyzing your footprints, your lower body is unstable. But I've observed your leg muscles and tendons. There shouldn't be a major problem, Meng Chao pondered. When you kick off the ground, do you first feel a needle-like sting in your soles, and half a second later, it moves to your knees? Chu Feixiong was shocked. How did you know? Meng Chao smiled. You haven't mastered the essence of the mighty bull force at all. At most, you're exerting 50% of your power. The remaining half has nowhere to go and runs rampant in your body, rebounding against your legs and soles, putting extra pressure on your knees and ankles. If you keep training blindly like this, at best you won't exert full power. At worst, you'll suffer from osteoporosis, joint aging, and long-term excessive cardiovascular pressure. This isn't cultivation, it's seeking death. Ignoring the toilet behind him, he looked quite like an otherworldly Master. Chu Feixiong was stunned, and obediently let Meng Chao study his height, weight, limb length, body fat percentage, and muscle distribution. Meng Chao closed his eyes to calculate for a moment, and a series of future power exertion formulas surfaced in his mind. Opening his eyes again, brilliant light radiated from them. He held a sharpened pencil lead between his fingers. Come on, try exerting power again. As Chu Feixiong circulated the mighty bull force, his muscles expanded, and his blood vessels protruded. Meng Chao suddenly poked him with the pencil tip. Chu Feixiong was about to cry out in pain, but instead felt a numb, electric sensation. A miraculous power was fine-tuning every strand of his muscles, every blood vessel, and every nerve bundle. The originally scattered brute force was now gathered together. What technique is this? Soon, the great white bear's expression changed from suspicion to pleasant surprise. Exerting power is so much smoother. Nothing hurts anymore, and it even feels like my strength has increased. This is all due to your years of hard practice. I'm just helping you find the trick to release your power completely. Meng Chao's pencil tip moved like a flying needle, becoming increasingly fluid. He poked him 300 to 500 times before finally coming to a stop. Meng Chao shook his sore wrist. Try a punch. The great white bear Chu Feixiong gathered all his strength. The sting from the pencil tip on his acupuncture points guided him into a slightly different posture. His muscles tightened to the limit. He seemed to shrink a size, but became sturdier, like high-density granite. A punch blasted out. Faint ripples appeared in the air, creating a sound like tearing cloth as it broke the air. Hiss! Chu Feixiong was startled by the sheer exhilaration of the strike. He had never thrown such a satisfying punch. It was like a mountain torrent, unstoppable. Though untested, he was certain this punch increased his limit by at least 3%. Increasing punch power by 3% with just a few minutes of adjustment. Meng Chao's methods could no longer be described as merely monstrous. Chu Feixiong's face was full of shock while he threw the punch. The fire at the corner of Meng Chao's eye, the seed of hope, glowed magnificently again. Sparks transformed into lines of text. Mentoring ordinary citizen Chu Feixiong in the basic skill, Mighty Bull technique. Learning progress, 10%. An ordinary citizen has grown stronger. The overall combat power of Dragon City has increased. Congratulations, your civilization has become more powerful. Contribution points plus 10. Meng Chao was surprised and delighted. The implications were profound. This means I don't have to pick up trash? As long as I teach future martial arts to current Dragon City citizens, it counts as a contribution to civilization. It made sense. A civilization's strength didn't rely on a single hero fighting alone. No matter how strong he became, he couldn't solo every monster and otherworld god or demon. But if he could become a gold medal mentor, even more capable than Demon Yen, and teach future martial arts to all citizens, making everyone 100 times stronger than in his nightmare, wouldn't they beat the crap out of those otherworld entities? So, this is the true meaning of contribution points. The stronger the civilization, the stronger I become. Thinking of this, the fire before his eyes shifted. Congratulations to the Hope Bearer for contributing more than 1 point to civilization. Please choose your first contribution reward. Option 1. Upgrade Mighty Bull Technique from Expert to Master. Option 2. Awaken a new skill. Basic Marksmanship or Ripple Technique. Detailed costs followed. Upgrading Mighty Bull Technique required 756 points. Awakening Basic Marksmanship required 3,100 points. Awakening Ripple Technique required 1,500 points. They are both part of the 3 basic force exertion methods. Why is there such a huge price difference between Mighty Bull Technique and Ripple Technique? Meng Chao remembered awakening the Mighty Bull Technique had cost him 3,500 points. Thinking carefully, the Mighty Bull Technique was a fierce, rigid style he hadn't practiced much since his injury. The Ripple Technique, however, was flexible and long-lasting, excellent for rehabilitation. Over the past year, while other cultivation had stalled, he had persisted with the Ripple Technique. Is it cheaper because I already know a bit of the Ripple Technique? Meng Chao mused. One was rigid, the other flexible. One an upgrade, one an awakening. Which to choose? He nodded and selected Basic Marksmanship. Was he kidding? Since it was a free gift, of course he'd pick the most expensive one. The rapid staccato of gunfire echoed in his mind, like a howling bullet storm. With a single thought, countless firearm structures and shooting essentials surfaced. Past life memories flashed before him like crystalline shards. He saw himself firing incessantly at all kinds of otherworld creatures, firing and firing. Some of these creatures looked as if an octopus had been forcefully stuffed into the belly of a roasted chicken, 100 times uglier than current monsters. In that instant, Meng Chao seemed to blast hundreds upon thousands of such monsters to pieces. His marksmanship experience skyrocketed, and a numb electric pleasure surged into every nerve ending, making him groan with pure bliss. Fat Bear, don't worry. I will definitely make sure you get into military school, Meng Chao promised. Seeing him with his eyes closed, a face full of intoxication and making strange noises, Chu Feixiong couldn't help but shudder. The big idiot, a student weighing over 200 pounds, shrank into the corner. Chu Feixiong looked at him as if he were a monster, feeling a hair-raising chill down his spine.
Trotting all the way back to the cultivation room, the great white bear Chu Feixiong reached the punch force tester in 2 steps and impatiently started the device. The massive and precise crystal machinery emitted a creaking sound as it hummed to life, and the display screen lit up. Chu Feixiong howled and beat his chest like a gorilla. Following the force exertion skills Meng Chao had taught him, he struck the opening stance of the Mighty Bull Technique. Just as he was about to exert force, someone unexpectedly blocked his path. It was Zhuohaoren. What's the matter? The great white bear asked stiffly, his entire body uncomfortably tense with built-up power. Who gave you permission to touch the punch force tester? Monitor Zhuohaoren said with a stern face. Even though it's a self-study period, you still have to follow class discipline. Everyone is cultivating seriously, but what about you and Meng Chao? You slipped out as soon as class started, and only returned 20 minutes later. Now you just decide on your own to test your punch force. Did you get permission? His voice was neither too loud nor too soft, just enough for the entire cultivation room to hear. The great white bear's eyebrows shot up in anger. Don't be angry, classmate Chu Feixiong. I'm doing this for your own good, Zhuohaoren said, glancing at Meng Chao. After all, you are different from certain people. You still have a high hope of getting into an undergraduate program. With only a month and a half left, focus on your final sprint. Stop hanging around with certain people, lest you ruin your future and find it too late for regrets. All right, go cultivate first. 10 minutes before class ends, I will organize everyone to line up for the punch test. The monitor waved his hand dismissively. With such a self-righteous attitude, the great white bear flew into a rage. Monitor Zhua, do you really think you're a teacher? Stop overstepping your authority. Chu Feixiong shouted. I just had an epiphany regarding the mighty bull force. That's why I'm in a hurry to test my strength. Even the homeroom teacher or Demon Yen wouldn't stop me. Why are you meddling? If you waste my epiphany, can you afford the cost? His naturally loud voice immediately drew the attention of the classmates. Everyone perked up their ears, curious as to why the two top experts of the class were in an open conflict. Zhua Haoren's face darkened. He hadn't expected Chu Feixiong to dare act out like this in public. This was throwing his kindness back in his face. An epiphany? Zhua Haoren sneered. Classmate Chu Feixiong, I saw your stance. It was crooked and bizarre, far from the standard mighty bull force. Exerting force like that won't produce a heavy punch. What kind of epiphany is that? I'm in charge of this self-study period. Your mighty bull force is so clumsy. It's one thing if you can't throw a heavy punch, but if your power goes astray and causes an injury that ruins your high school graduation exam, I truly wouldn't be able to pay for that. If you really want to use the punch force tester, go to the side and figure out the mighty bull force properly before you come back. My mighty bull force has a problem? Chu Feixiong laughed in extreme anger. Meng Chao stepped forward, blocking the path of the enraged great white bear. Since the monitor feels Chu Feixiong's exertion isn't standard enough, why don't you demonstrate the standard mighty bull force for us to study diligently, all right? He had a smile on his face, looking seemingly sincere. Zhua Haoren snorted coldly. Being able to serve as the monitor, he naturally possessed the strength to suppress the entire class. Look closely, this is the real mighty bull force. A cold glint flashed in the monitor's eyes. He struck a nearly perfect stance, twisted his hips, and threw a punch like a bolt of lightning. Bang! The punch force tester shook violently. The numbers on the display skipped frantically before settling. 225 kilograms. Isn't that Zhua Haoren's own class record? Last time, he had to charge up for a long time to hit that. Now he matched his record with just a casual punch. His power is becoming more and more terrifying. Over the past month or two, the monitor's improvement has been so fast. His limit punch force has surpassed the heavyweight boxing kings of the Earth era. Getting into a prestigious university is now a sure thing. I remember the great white bear's limit was 220 kilograms. The monitor's physique is a size smaller than his, yet his punch force exceeds it by 5 kilograms. The eye-catching data caused the onlookers to whisper in low voices. The girls were drawn to Zhua Haoren's handsome posture, some even blushing slightly. Everyone was forced to agree with the monitor's view. This was the standard mighty bull force, the only way to throw a truly heavy punch. Zhua Haoren pulled back his fist. He stared directly at Chu Feixiong, while glancing at Meng Chao out of the corner of his eye. Did both of you see that clearly? His expression was indifferent, leaving no room for rebuttal. A few classmates who were close with the great white bear, fearing he would suffer in a conflict, whispered from behind, Bear, forget it. Let's just test together later. Meng Chao, come and help talk him down, don't just stand there like an big idiot. Before the words could even settle, Meng Chao stepped back half a step, and the great white bear strode forward. You! Zhua Haoren's face darkened. He didn't yield an inch as the two collided head-on. Mighty bull force against mighty bull technique. Bang! It was as if an angry bull and a furious rhinoceros had crashed into each other. Many students couldn't bear to watch, already imagining the great white bear being sent flying, ending up in a pathetic belly-up heap. They were wrong. The one who retreated 7 or 8 steps and collapsed onto the ground, his fair face turning blue and purple, was actually Zhua Haoren, who had just been showboating. And it wasn't over yet. The great white bear took advantage of the momentum and charged forward. The friction between his sneakers and the floor emitted a scream, releasing the scent of burning rubber. Every inch of his muscle looked like red-hot steel, and his fists were like ignited dynamite. Boom! A thunderous explosion echoed as the punch hit the bullseye, far louder than Zhua Haoren's earlier strike. The punch force tester even jumped up. The numbers on the display skipped wildly, taking a long time to settle. 232 kilograms. He surpassed the monitor. It's a new class record. The students were dumbstruck. Even the great white bear Chu Feixiong couldn't believe it. He looked at his own fist, then turned back to look at Meng Chao, his face filled with shock that was beyond words. In the deathly silent cultivation room, Meng Chao was the first to jump up and shout at the top of his lungs. Fatty Xiong, you're so despicable. How dare you secretly cultivate such a powerful, super mighty bull force behind my back? You've completely suppressed the monitor. The students looked at each other in confusion. Super mighty bull force? You guys don't know? Meng Chao looked around and said in shock. Many powerhouses in society and the military are constantly improving the mighty bull force, developing many powerful upgraded versions that are far superior to our high school version. Chu Feixiong must be using an upgraded version. Otherwise, there's no reason he would crush the monitor like this, right? In reality, their limit punch force only differed by a few kilograms, hardly worlds apart. Zhua Haoren was fast and skilled in leg techniques. In actual combat, he would still have the upper hand. Meng Chao's claims of suppressing and crushing were gross exaggerations. However, Zhua Haoren had been caught off guard and hit so hard he nearly lost his breath. He couldn't speak for the moment and could only let Meng Chao drag his name through the mud, so infuriated that he couldn't even stand up. The students followed Meng Chao's logic and nodded subconsciously. Many military powerhouses and research institutes are constantly exploring upgraded versions, different from the common school versions. Everyone envied Chu Feixiong. Learning such a method right before the high school graduation exam was like adding wings to a tiger. Fatty Xiong, you're ruthless. Meng Chao gave his bewildered best friend a thumbs up. I heard some high-end classes charge hundreds of thousands in tuition. You actually spent that much? Then again, during the final battle of the high school graduation exam, every point can change your destiny. This was well worth it. It's a pity I don't have the connections. Otherwise, I'd sell everything I own just to learn the super mighty bull force. Meng Chao slapped his thigh, his face full of regret, leaving the students deep in thought. Wait! Meng Chao's eyes suddenly lit up as he sized up his friend. Big idiot. No, brother Xiong, how about you teach me the super mighty bull force? Chu Feixiong was dazed. What on earth? Didn't you just teach me this in the bathroom? Don't be so quick to refuse. I know that with the high school graduation exam approaching, everyone is racing against the clock. We are classmates, but also competitors for the exam. There's no reason for you to teach for free. I can pay tuition. Chu Feixiong started to speak, but Meng Chao jumped in. Talking about money between schoolmates is just too vulgar. How about this? We settle using cultivation resources, gene medicines, high-energy nutrient solutions, cell fortifiers, or monster materials. Whatever you want, just say the word. Business is business, even between brothers. Chu Feixiong wasn't a big idiot. He finally realized that Meng Chao was trying to make a profit and had to help him act out this show. He looked conflicted and slightly hesitant. Brother Xiong, save the children. Meng Chao said with eyes filled with fake tears. Chu Feixiong looked very reluctant. Teaching you one wouldn't be a problem. Let's go to the corner and talk. Let's go. Meng Chao was ecstatic. Wait! The classmates' ears were practically burning from listening, and someone finally couldn't hold back. They had been stuck at a plateau for months, their limit punch force refusing to increase, leaving them unable to sleep at night. Seeing Chu Feixiong's stunning punch and having Meng Chao's transformation as a precedent, how could they miss this godsend opportunity? Most students who could get into a district key school had decent families, and to squeeze out a few extra points for the high school graduation exam, they didn't mind spending some cultivation resources. In an instant, the students crowded around. Brother Xiong, you can't just teach Meng Chao. We're classmates too. I'm also a child, save me as well. Brother Xiong, everyone knows you're the most loyal. Help me out, please. And me. Besides the cultivation resources, I'll even bring you breakfast for a month, alright? Brother Xiong, Boss Xiong, we're all brothers, save the children. Everyone was desperately flattering him, completely forgetting that the monitor was still sitting on the floor. Zhua Haoren grit his teeth, his handsome face completely distorted. Driving one sheep is no different from driving a whole flock. How about we start a study group? Everyone can chip in some cultivation resources to subsidize you, and you can show some spirit by making a contribution to the class collective. Meng Chao thoughtfully offered a suggestion. That's a great idea. The Super Mighty Bull Technique Study Group, I'm in. The students chimed in one after another, and at this point, Chu Feixiong could only nod. Right then, a message popped up in the corner of Meng Chao's vision. Your proposal has promoted class harmony. The students' motivation to learn has significantly increased, making it more likely they will achieve high scores and contribute more to civilization in the near future. Contribution points plus 11. Classmate Chu Feixiong is truly principled. Meng Chao couldn't help but sigh. With the high school graduation exam so close, he's still willing to spend time and energy helping everyone progress together. What a good person. Tell me, with such a selfless soul and such great strength, why didn't the teacher choose him as monitor in the first place? The class fell into an awkward silence for a moment before people started to laugh awkwardly. Zhua Haoran, who had just climbed back up, was so infuriated that he saw stars and nearly collapsed again. Regarding the price for learning the Mighty Bull technique, Meng Chao went with a high-volume, low-margin strategy, practically giving it away. Everyone recognized the value. Before school ended, more than half the class had joined the study group. Some well-off students brought various cultivation resources early. Over a dozen gene medicines, high-energy nutrients, bone cell growth factor. They were all high-end brands that Meng Chao couldn't afford even if he sold everything he owned. Meng Chao took Chu Feixiong to the rooftop to split the loot and taught him some of the Mighty Bull technique's force exertion formulas and acupuncture point stimulation methods, so he could start leading the class in practice. Chu Feixiong agreed to host the study group for Meng Chao, but firmly refused to take any of the cultivation resources. The Great White Bear said his family was slightly better off than Meng Chao's, so his basic resources were guaranteed. Since Meng Chao wanted to sprint for the undergraduate program, he had to cherish every hard-won drop of resources. After much persuasion, Meng Chao forced a third of the loot into his best friend's backpack. The Great White Bear asked again about the origin of the Super Mighty Bull Force. Meng Chao thought for a bit and blamed everything on the dark web. "Are you still browsing those underground life science forums?" The Great White Bear was shocked. "Those places are full of cultivation maniacs and mad scientists. They release seemingly powerful secret methods for free, but it's rarely out of kindness. It's more likely they want users to be lab rats to help them test their data. Last year, when you were hospitalized with injuries, wasn't that because you learned a beta test technique from those underground forums? Haven't you suffered enough from that?" Meng Chao could only say he was very careful this time, having mulled over it for months to ensure there were no issues before sharing it with everyone. "You know my family's situation. If I don't take a risk, how can I compete with rich second-generation kids like Zhua Haoran, and how can I protect my family from those ferocious monsters?" Meng Chao pondered. "But your concerns make sense. How about this? Help me explain clearly to everyone that the Super Mighty Bull Force is a test version and might have plenty of bugs. Anyone who feels it's dangerous can have their cultivation resources refunded. Originally, I priced it so low just to make a contribution. If they don't want to learn, why would I force them?" After his best friend left, Meng Chao leaned against the rooftop railing alone, watching the sunset. The star of the other world was larger and more vivid than Earth's sun. Clouds steamed and surged as the sky and city turned into an ocean of red. Standing in the center of this red sea was a towering spire, crafted from alloys infused with rare metals from the other world. Its ductility and pressure resistance were greatly enhanced, allowing the tower to break the limits of skyscrapers from the Earth era, piercing the heavens as if leading directly to the universe. Countless shimmering dots of light circled the tower, flying in and out like a swarm of bees. Those were the Transcendents. This magnificent building, standing out from the crowd, was called the Transcendent Tower, the headquarters of the Transcendent Association. Surrounding the Transcendent Tower were buildings resembling a combination of pyramids and fortresses, lined up closely and as sturdy as gravity dams, capable of withstanding the impact of the strongest monsters. Between the skyscrapers, countless tiny black dots scaled walls and leaped across roofs, ordinary citizens just finishing work. In this era of Dragon City, private cars and taxis were rare due to resource scarcity and tight space. Ordinary citizens possessed abundant physical strength and agile movement. Running long distances was hardly slower than transferring between buses. Some wore maneuver gear manufactured using biomimetic principles to simulate monster limbs. Wearing them provided great elasticity and jet propulsion. A light leap could cover 10 to 20 meters, making speeds of 40 to 50 kilometers per hour child's play. In the distance, domesticated giant sandworms arched and churned, swallowing and spitting rocks like shield tunneling machines to construct the 12th subway line. Further away at the city's edge, mist loomed like a gray wall that blotted out the sun, completely sealing off the outside world. Previously, Meng Chao disliked the mist, feeling it sealed Dragon City and prevented Earthlings from expanding and dominating the other world. He also disliked the city before him. The buildings were too dense, the streets too crowded, and the cultivation pressure too great. Without seeing real mountains or the ocean, he always felt stifled. Like all teenagers, he had secretly watched too many books and movies about Earth. His dreams were filled with that world of blue skies, white clouds, fresh air and peaceful beauty, a world where people were carefree. Everything on Earth. The high mountains, oceans, farmlands, and great rivers. High school students there only had to take 2 PE classes a week, but dozens of literature and mathematics classes. Adults only worked 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, yet they could earn big money, live in large houses, and go on frequent vacations. They ate pure, green, non-polluted, and non-GMO delicacies. It was as beautiful as paradise. It wasn't until he saw the real otherworld in his nightmare after the mist cleared, seeing the transcendent tower and the entire city vanish into ash during the burst of meteor fire, that Meng Chao realized how precious everything before him truly was. His eyes grew hot without him noticing. Earth was a homeland he could never return to, and the nightmare was a tomorrow that hadn't yet arrived. The city before him was his only home. Facing an unclear future and the upcoming crisis, he felt nervous, excited, and impulsive, but also somewhat lost. Right then, the Mighty Bull technique is spreading among ordinary citizens. Dragon City's overall combat power has increased. Contribution points +1, +3, +2. The strange fire flickered before his eyes, and a string of contribution points made him both surprised and delighted. It's the Great White Bear. He's currently leading the study group. It seems that even if I'm not mentoring them personally and the technique is spread indirectly, I still get credit as a contribution. Although the contribution points are much lower than from personal mentoring, many grains of sand make a tower. As more citizens grow stronger, I will also continue to grow stronger. We will definitely survive in the other world, in an instant. Meng Chao felt his waist was no longer sore and his legs no longer ached. His memory became clearer, and his vision and hearing had a slight improvement. Even the bright red school badge on his chest seemed to become more vibrant. His contribution points rose to 39. Making a contribution feels great. Meng Chao thought happily. At this time, the roar of propellers echoed from the sky. Dozens of armored airships tore through the clouds like a majestic fleet, cutting through the waves and diving down. Lacking aviation fuel and with crystal engines being too heavy, combined with Dragon City being enveloped in mist, their cruising altitude and range were quite limited. Supersonic fighters and such had long been stored away in underground armories. Now, Dragon City's aerial force primarily consisted of clumsy, slow, but fiercely armed armored airships. Crystals were pulverized and spirit energy surged wildly, driving 3 rows of 6 propellers to rotate at high speeds. The massive amount of spirit chi released was used to fill the giant gas bags to maintain the buoyancy of these behemoths. There was also spirit chi leaking from the gaps in the gas bags, making a hissing whistle. This made the armored airships look like iron gods and demons riding the clouds. The armored airships lowered loudspeakers and announced to the entire city. Attention all citizens, latest news from the Municipal Meteorological Bureau. A mist attack is coming tonight, and monsters will break into the urban area. The primary areas for monster appearances are predicted to be near the North City Steel Plant. The Survival Committee has issued Order Number 93 of the 55th year of the new era, ordering the Dragon Steel Group to enter Level 1 combat readiness immediately. Jusha and Jiangbin districts will enter Level 2 readiness, while other areas will enter Level 3 readiness. All citizens, please strictly follow the regulations, stay alert, and prepare to face the enemy. Always remember, we are Earth's expeditionary force. Earth is with us, and Dragon City will be victorious. The weather forecast was an order. Instantly, whether inside or outside the campus or on the streets, the pace of students, workers, and white-collar professionals quickened by a notch. A monster siege tonight? Meng Chao's heart tightened. He hurriedly swung his backpack onto his back. Taking 3 steps at once, he spiraled downstairs like a whirlwind. He left the school gate and rushed to the bus station. With monsters approaching, the city's operational efficiency improved significantly. The bus soon arrived. Buses in this era were also driven by spirit energy, carrying a huge crystal engine like a hunchback. It was also called the turtle bus. It whooshed out spirit chi like an ancient steam train entering a station. The fuel for the bus was the lowest grade inferior crystal. Being full of impurities and having an insufficient reaction, the spirit chi sprayed out had a garlic smell and was somewhat irritating to the eyes. Meng Chao rubbed his eyes and impatiently squeezed onto the bus. Tianfu Garden was a common public housing estate found everywhere in the old city. After 30 years of the Monster War, a large number of buildings that had traversed from Earth were destroyed. The Survival Committee built a vast amount of indestructible new residences modeled after war fortresses. Defensive capability was the most important priority, with comfort being a secondary consideration. The main unit type in Tianfu Garden consisted of 2-bedroom apartments of 60 square meters. It sounded decent enough, but residential and office buildings these days had to reserve significant space for machine guns, anti-aircraft gun positions, and shelters. The walls were 3 times as thick as in the past, and every single wall was a load-bearing wall. Therefore, the shared area was more than twice that of the Earth era, leaving a practical area of at most 30 square meters. Each room was as small as a sparrow's cage. To meet the needs of defending the city and exploring the other world, the Survival Committee encouraged childbirth. While the population exploded, the facilities aged and illegal structures appeared, making the environment even more harsh. Sewage flowed everywhere, and the air was filled with stench. Dilapidated pipes leaked, and spirit energy hissed like 100 sirens. Residents couldn't afford top-grade crystals for household fuel and used cheap ones on par with those for buses. There were too many impurities and the smell was too strong. The entire community was immersed in colorful spirit energy all day long, like a street of barbecue stalls. Adding to that, the armor on the exterior walls was mottled and corroded by monster acid, appearing messy and grotesque. The residents here wanted to leave Tianfu Garden at all times. When adults were idle, they loved to scold their children. Why aren't you cultivating properly? All you do is recite Tang and song poetry all day. What's the use of that stuff? When will you pass the high school graduation exam, get into an undergraduate program, and become a transcendent? If we could live in a 120 square meter commercial housing estate, our ancestral graves on Earth would surely smoke with pride. Standing at the entrance of the wet market beside the community, Meng Chao had no complaints, only warm memories. Finally, I'm home. He heard the kind and familiar voices from the market. River snails, fresh river snails just caught from the river. Look, they still bite. Fresh mighty bull demonic boar liver. Give it to your kids so they get 100 on every exam and can kill monsters with every punch. Uncle, won't you take a piece? Jade fruits, newly cultivated from the genetic farm. Tastier than peaches on Earth. Juicy and sweet with every bite. If it's not ripe or sweet, you don't pay. The hustle and bustle was full of life. Meng Chao smiled. He greedily inhaled the aroma drifting from the cooked food stalls, walked through the market, and entered Tianfu Garden. Brother. Meng Chao rounded the small square, and someone suddenly called him. Looking back, a little girl in a junior high school uniform was dragging a large, heavy iron bucket, like a hard-working little ant dragging food several times its size. The little girl was cute, like a budding flower. Her eyes were curved with a hint of mischief. The uniform was one size too large, making her look even more delicate. She waved while hopping. Come help me. I'm exhausted. Oh. Meng Chao walked toward his sister, Bai Jiaocao, feeling a bit dazed. Looking at that pretty little face that hadn't yet fully matured, his brain throbbed again. It felt as if a red-hot steel needle was piercing through his temple and into the deepest part of his mind, releasing crystalline shards of memory. Her beautiful long black hair turned into flaming purple hair, and her jewel-like black eyes shone with a seductive light. She bore a pair of wide bloodshot wings, like a demon descending from the depths of the blood hell abyss. A mysterious and evil smile played on the corners of her mouth. Her heavy, colorful beauty was enough to make the hearts of half the creatures in the other world burst with terror. This was the Night Witch. Wherever she went, she brought the eternal night of endless darkness. Brother. Heh heh. Meng Chao seemed to see his sister far into the future, the girl who would become the Night Witch, treading him under her feet while sneering mysteriously. Brother. What's up? A small hand waved in front of his eyes. Bai Jiaocao looked at him oddly. You look like a mouse who just saw a cat. Meng Chao, meow meow meow. He never expected her to be this kind of sister. His eyes flickered with a strange light. Brother, what are you doing? Bai Jiaozhao felt a chill down her spine. Let me ask you something, Meng Chao said weirdly. Do you have any dissatisfaction with me? How could I, brother? What could I possibly be dissatisfied with? Nonsense, of course I'm dissatisfied, you bad brother. Do I treat you poorly or bully you often? No way, brother is the best to me. You never bully me. Of course you're not good. You bully me every day. You're the great demon king. You really have the nerve to ask such a question. I'm saying if, one day you gain great power, would you tread me under your feet? Oh my God, my dear elder brother, what on earth are you thinking? How could I tread you under my feet? Am I that brutal? Hee, you guessed right. If this lady gets power, the first thing I'll do is tread you, this bad brother, under my feet. Stomp hard, stomp stomp stomp, oh ho ho ho. Bai Jiaozhao tried her best to control her facial expression, but the thought of flipping the script and standing triumphantly over her tyrannical big brother was uncontrollable. Meng Chao narrowed his eyes and suddenly reached out his devil's claws, covering his sister's head and rubbing it vigorously. Brother, what did I do to provoke you? Bullying me again? Bai Jiaozhao was both angry and flustered, her small face flushed red. Does a brother need a reason to bully his sister? Meng Chao felt a surge of satisfaction. He thought to himself, who told you to stomp on me so hard after you became the Night Witch? While I can still beat you, I'll enjoy myself first. Since he had returned from the nightmare, he would never allow even a sliver of misfortune to befall his family again. Little sister, I won't let you become the terrifying Night Witch. You should be the happiest, most beautiful and most beloved little princess in the entire city. No, the entire other world. As he thought this, he messed up the little princess's hair even more. Brother, I hate you. Well, I just love the way you hate me but can't get rid of me. Tianfu Garden. Building 19. Unit 3. Due to power shortages and monster invasions, buildings in this era rarely had elevators installed. Adults were used to climbing the walls like geckos and entering their homes directly through the windows. Teenagers, however, found climbing the stairs to be no effort at all. Meng Chao and Bai Jiaozhao pushed and pulled the heavy iron bucket of iron-armored rhino beef until they reached the door of Unit 704. Nailed to the paint-peeling alloy door was a 5 Good Family plaque. Beneath the plaque, 65 deformed horned skulls were spray-painted, each marked with a red cross, representing the 65 monsters this family had slain. This scene, both familiar and strange, made Meng Chao's nose sting with emotion. In his nightmare, 20 years of a plain yet happy life for this family of 4 had come to a sudden halt amidst the chaos. Having returned from that nightmare, Meng Chao was determined to guard everything forever. Mom, I'm home. Even though he had the keys in his pocket, Meng Chao couldn't help but shout. The cramped but tidy room was as stifling as a steamer. In the open kitchen squeezed next to the small living room, Bai Suxin, who had difficulty moving her legs, was sweating profusely in front of the stove. Seeing her children return, the woman was filled with joy, and the wrinkles on her face smoothed out. You two have sharp noses, coming back exactly on time. Bai Suxin brought over a plate of golden food. Eat the spring rolls while they're hot. They're filled with 9-eyed fish meat. It's a newly mutated species. No one's seen it before and few dare to eat it. It was very cheap, so I bought a lot. If it tastes good, I'll make more in the future. Mom! Meng Chao took a deep breath, his hands trembling as he took the spring roll his mother had fried. He took a careful bite. It was fragrant. The meat was sweet, a sweetness he felt he hadn't tasted in many years. This child, why are you crying just from eating a spring roll? Bai Suxin looked at Meng Chao, then at Bai Jiaozhao. Bai Jiaozhao made a small face and tapped her temple, signaling to her mother. Brother's brain is broken today. Show some respect. I heard you talking about your brother from outside. Meng Yishan walked into the house with heavy steps and was instantly immersed in the warm atmosphere, his fatigue vanishing. He felt everyone in the family was acting a bit strange today, especially his son. Why were his eyes so red? He didn't look possessed. He looked more like his wife after she finished watching those ancient Earth Korean dramas. In his memory, his father had always been a pillar of strength. Quick, turn on the TV and see if there's a live broadcast of the battle. Bai Jiaozhao turned on the TV while munching on a spring roll. With the monster invasion tonight, every channel was broadcasting emergency combat programs. Latest news, At 1855 tonight, the military's Battle Crab Commando Unit completed its deployment at the northern city defense positions. On the screen, six-legged war machines resembling giant steel crabs appeared. Equipped with reactive armor, their slightly bulky shells were engraved with a large number of profound and complex runes. Dark red crystals were embedded in the gaps of the armor. Flame-like spirit energy crisscrossed along the strokes of the runes, flowing to the ends of the war machine's limbs. The constant hissing of spirit chi gave these biomimetic crawler tanks a grotesque and powerful feeling, a fusion of the steam age and future technology. These steel giant crabs are Dragon City's latest and most advanced war machines. The monsters of the otherworld will eventually be drowned in Dragon City's iron torrent. On the screen, the atmosphere was tense and filled with killing intent. Most residential communities had their doors and windows sealed. Machine gun and anti-aircraft gun positions were everywhere on the ground, with soldiers patrolling with guns on their shoulders. June and July are the breeding season for dozens of crustacean monsters like the flame black beetles. In the last 3 mist descents, the main invading forces were crustacean monsters. To deal with these, it is suggested that citizens use more armor-piercing rounds. We now have monster expert Professor Ke Jindong from the Biology Department of Dragon City University to introduce the habits and weaknesses of crustacean monsters in detail. Hello, Professor Ke. Hello, host. Hello, viewers. The host and the monster expert conversed fluently. On the screen, above a luxury estate, a bald, burly man with a tattoo of a skeletal tiger on his head rose into the sky. 2 9-ring ghost head sabers crossed on his back. Complex spirit patterns continuously emerged on his skin, glowing and gradually detaching from his flesh to swirl around him, forming spirit energy armor that could change at will. Ah! Bai Jiazao stopped halfway through washing the dishes, drawn by the screen. She watched intently, not at the 6-star Transcendent, but at the luxury mansion he had flown out from. That's Dragon City 1. Master Luo Wu lives there, Bai Jiazao lamented. I heard the smallest apartments in Dragon City 1 are 200 square meters. The decoration is as beautiful as a palace. It's not like our community, which reeks. They use the purest high-quality piped spirit chi, which smells sweet. Also, their property management company has its own main battle tanks. Over half the residents in the community are transcendent. They aren't afraid even if they encounter nightmare beasts. Pausing for a moment, she shook her head. Why say all this? 1 bathroom in Dragon City 1 was probably more expensive than a whole house in Tianfu Garden. Suddenly, a piercing alarm came from outside the window. 3 short beeps followed by a long siren. This was the Level 1 combat readiness signal. The entire community cut off electricity and spirit energy supplies on time. All energy had to be concentrated and prioritized for the defense system. Alloy armor plates over 20 centimeters thick dropped, covering the windows of every household, leaving only fist-sized shooting holes and observation holes. Automated combat fortresses rose from the neighborhood wet market, small supermarkets, small squares, and primary schools. From the residence committee, rumbled a scarred, old-fashioned anti-monster self-propelled gun. The Joint Defense Tactical Squad also drove out a rust-spotted infantry fighting vehicle to form a mobile force. Tianfu Garden. Fortressization complete. The mist descended. Monsters appeared. Upstairs and downstairs, footsteps were urgent but not chaotic. Regardless of gender or age, all residents were mobilized. Former elite marksmen from the military were at their windows and balconies, forming crossfire through the shooting holes. The elderly, women and children also prepared emergency food and medical kits, picking up daggers, bayonets, and entrenching shovels. If monsters broke into the residential buildings, they would offer the final resistance. After decades of being baptized by wind and waves, the nerves of Dragon City people had become extremely thick. Meng Chao dragged a semi-automatic rifle to the living room window and skillfully used sofa cushions to set up a kneeling shooting position. He squinted through the shooting hole in the armor and looked out. In the pitch-black night, the mist that originally covered the field spread toward the city like the tentacles of a demon. Deep within the mist, red and blue lights flickered. The lights writhed, and monsters gradually revealed their hideous figures. The spirit energy oscillator set in the center of the small square continuously released infrasound waves inaudible to the human ear to attract the monster's attention. Shasha shasha. Hundreds of flame black beetles were attracted, merging into a black torrent surging toward the main square. Each flame black beetle was the size of a calf. Their black metallic lustered shells were covered in flame-like markings. A pair of oversized mouthparts were like upper and lower guillotines, capable of biting through even an iron rod as thick as a bull's mouth. Schwa! The searchlights set atop the residential buildings suddenly lit up. Dozens of thick light beams tore the darkness to shreds, leaving the monsters with nowhere to hide. Zzz. Around the small square, dozens of high-voltage electrical towers rose from the ground, firing hundreds of blinding electric arcs, electrocuting the monsters until green smoke rose and they were unable to move. Chi. Inside dozens of automated combat fortresses resembling tortoise shells, crystals were crushed, releasing high-temperature and high-pressure spirit chi to propel projectiles. They whistled out like a torrential rain toward the monsters. The principle was similar to an air gun from the Earth era, but driven by spirit chi, the lethality was naturally 100 times stronger than compressed air. The flame black beetles were first electrocuted into a daze, and then riddled with holes by the shooting. Even with their hard shells, insect juice splashed, and casualties were heavy. Ah Chow, how is the battle? Meng Chao brought neighbor Grandma Wang over. There was also Grandma Wang's pet beast, a hound genetically modulated to have fangs like a saber-toothed tiger. The two families were very familiar. As soon as the saber-toothed hound entered, it circled by Jiaocao, wagging its tail vigorously. It's okay for now, we've stabilized. Meng Chao turned back. Grandma Wang, you should watch out for your own safety too. Good kid, looking down on this old lady's old arms and legs, are you? Grandma Wang said, carrying a shotgun and looking full of vigor. Have you seen the chaos right after the traversal into the other world? How many zombies did you kill during the virus outbreak? How many years have you fought in the monster war? Back in my day, that old man of mine and I. Grandma Wang, I was wrong, I know you'll be fine. Please just look after my mom and sister. Thank you. Meng Chao felt a bit of a headache. The first wave of flame black beetles was beaten into a rout, but the mist tonight was exceptionally thick. More and more flame black beetles surged from the depths of the mist, crowding the streets until their shells scraped against each other, creating sharp noises and even sparks. Hundreds of flame black beetles rushed toward the community square like moths to a flame, disregarding casualties as they toppled the first high-voltage electrical tower. Mountains of corpses blocked the shooting holes of the automated turrets. In the second wave of the attacking monsters, the shells of many black beetles split open, revealing huge transparent wings as they clumsily took flight. It's a variant of the flame black beetle, the flying flame beetle. Meng Chao frowned deeply and wiped his face, kneeling at the shooting position next to them. Ah Chow, it might not be so easy to get through tonight. The mutant insects aren't that easy to deal with. Conserve your bullets and wait until they are close to shoot. Of the hundreds of flame black beetles, about 20 to 30 were the flying mutant variants. They flew over the electrical towers and combat fortresses toward the residential buildings, where crisscrossing lines of fire immediately erupted. Unfortunately, the trajectories of the flying flame beetles were erratic, and their shells were slick and curved, making it hard for bullets to bite. Even with a hit, if the angle wasn't perfect, the bullet would just bounce off. Damn, these bugs are too troublesome. Hitting them is just pure luck. Meng Chao's first burst missed, only drilling a hole through a flying flame beetle's transparent wing while it continued to fly. He cursed impatiently. Meng Chao had no time to be nervous. He carefully watched the floating information before his eyes. The fire of civilization needs steel and blood to guard. Would you like to activate the first combat mission, Insect Hunter? Kill 10 flame black beetles and 3 flying flame beetles in tonight's battle to contribute to defending your home. Initial combat mission reward, 1,500 contribution points and the choice to upgrade any basic skill by 1 level. Activate. Meng Chao slowly adjusted his breathing and heartbeat, turning a deaf ear to the gunfire and the shrieks of the monsters around him. In a daze, everything went quiet. Every detail of basic marksmanship transformed into neural currents, surging into his fingertips like lightning, locking his fingers and the firearm together. His gaze seemed vacant, focused on no single monster, but rather scanning the entire battlefield. The monsters' trajectories, wing vibrations, wind speed, and direction all turned into dazzling data. Ah Chow, are you scared? How about I do it? Meng Chao had been aiming in a kneeling position for a long time, leading Grandma Wang to misunderstand. The old lady carried a large shotgun, but its range was too short for long-distance aerial targets. Seeing Meng Chao holding a semi-automatic rifle without firing for so long, she thought he was stunned by the monsters. She was anxious and a bit eager for action. Before she could finish her sentence, bang bang bang. Meng Chao struck. The left wing of a flying flame beetle was torn off from the base, spraying fluorescent green juice. The beast fell down lopsidedly. Not bad, Ah Chao. Grandma Wang couldn't see the battle outside clearly, but just looking at the spirit Meng Chao showed while firing 3 shots in a row, she could feel it. The spirit in those 3 shots of yours isn't much worse than your granduncle when he was alive. Meng Chao's lip twitched. He had originally aimed for the center of the mouth parts, the biggest weakness of the black beetle race. A 3-round burst should have blown the beast up directly, but he was distracted by Grandma Wang's noisy chatter. You really are my dear grandma. Meng Chao was stuck between laughter and tears. Information popped up in his vision. Heavily injured a flying flame beetle, contribution points plus 1.1. Normal level basic marksmanship proficiency, increased by 0.8%, reaching 25%. So stingy, only 1 contribution point. But it still felt pretty good. He was becoming more familiar with the firearm, and the gun feel from his past life was gradually returning. Meng Chao focused his mind and unleashed full firepower, shooting more and more smoothly. Amidst the flickering firelight, information flashed incessantly. Killed a flame black beetle. Congratulations on completing your first kill and contributing to the defense of civilization. Contribution points plus 10, proficiency increased by 8%, reaching 53%. Killed a flame black beetle, contribution points plus 1.9, proficiency plus 0.9%, reaching 55%. Killed a flying flame beetle, contribution points plus 3, proficiency plus 2.5%, reaching 58%. Meng Chao let out a whistle, fully entering the zone. The rhythmic staccato of the gunfire made even Meng Yishan feel a bit hair-raised. He was usually busy with work and rarely concerned himself with his son's studies, but he had no idea high schoolers these days were this skilled with a gun. I was injured last year and it was hard to practice martial arts, so I simply practiced my marksmanship more, Meng Chao explained during a brief lull. I see, you've worked hard, Meng Yishan nodded, feeling a pang of heartache for his son. With the efforts of the father and son and other shooters in the community, the monster offensive was temporarily suppressed. Only 1 flying flame beetle landed on the residential building, waving its sharp mouthparts and stabbing into the exterior armor like a can opener, tearing at it frantically. It had only ripped away half a piece of armor before it was turned into a honeycomb by crossfire. The dense rain of bullets ignited the flammable mucus inside its body, turning the beast into a fireball as it fell. Cheers echoed from many shooting holes. Meng Yishan also let out a sigh of relief, a smile appearing on his face. Meng Chao, however, squinted his eyes. Something's wrong. A terrifying, mysterious monster hasn't appeared yet. I have to find it. Suddenly, he saw a giant, vividly marked flame black beetle, suspended quietly in the blood mist-shrouded night sky. Shwa! Its wings spread open. They weren't transparent, but faint gold, with 2 deep ghost eye patterns on them. The golden wings reached over 10 meters in length. With each vibration, golden powder rippled out like raging golden flames. That's it, the evolved form of the flying flame beetle, the ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle. That's it, the evolved form of the flying flame beetle, the ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle. Meng Chao's pupils constricted abruptly. A terrifying name surfaced from the deepest parts of his memory.
What is this? Behind the shooting holes and within the fortresses and trenches at the back of the square, the residents' faces changed drastically. They had never seen such an eerie flying flame insect, and its terrifying ghost eyes made their skin crawl with just a single glance. Super Beast. Li Daong, captain of the Tianfu Garden Joint Defense Squad, turned pale as he squeezed out those words from between his teeth. Humans are divided into ordinary people and transcendents. Monsters are also divided into ordinary monsters and super beasts. Ordinary monsters are nothing more than enhanced versions of beasts. Larger in size, faster in speed, with sharp claws and teeth, thick hides, and cunning ferocity. Ordinary people can overcome them with firearms, military organization, and a fearlessness of sacrifice. But a super beast is a completely different story. No one expected Tianfu Garden to have such terrible luck, not a single monster for half a year, and once they appear, it is a super beast. Worse, it was a mysterious, unknown superbeast that had just evolved. Its weaknesses, combat patterns and attack methods were all completely unknown. Concentrate all firepower and take down this superbeast, Li Daong ordered, grabbing the communicator to call. Tianfu Garden has discovered an unknown superbeast. I repeat, Tianfu Garden has discovered an unknown crustacean-type flying superbeast. Requesting transcendent backup. Unfortunately, the mist had descended, and spirit chi was surging wildly, causing severe interference. Only static could be heard in the communication channel. With monsters invading the entire city, it was unknown if the Transcendents engaged in fierce battle had heard Tianfu Garden's call for help. Bang! 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 The appearance of the superbeast meant residents were no longer stingy with their bullets. Hundreds of lines of fire instantly covered the sky. The ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle flapped its wings, whipping up a golden whirlwind to dodge the first wave of concentrated attacks. It then opened its four-petaled mouthparts, revealing a blood-red maw, and spat out crimson fireballs toward the ground. The fireballs were like napalm, and flames quickly spread across the surface of the buildings. Although the armor could not be burned through immediately, the intense flames and thick smoke severely interfered with the shooters behind the shooting holes. Other flying flame beetles took the opportunity to break through the fire net. They landed on building surfaces, waving their mouthparts to destroy the facades. That wasn't all. The powder shaking off the ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle's wings also stimulated the non-flying ordinary black beetles. Many flame black beetles, clearly emitting green smoke from being electrocuted, recovered their ferocity as if injected with stimulants after touching the golden powder. The black tide surged again, toppling several high-voltage electrical towers and automated fortresses. The defensive line was in critical danger. Bayonet squad ready. Facing the menacing insect tide, Joint Defense Captain Li Daong ripped off his camouflage uniform, revealing a lean and powerful physique crisscrossed with scars. He jumped onto an infantry fighting vehicle and shouted loudly, "Residents of Tianfu Garden, I have already called for backup. The army and Transcendents will arrive soon. But before they get here, let's show these bastards what we're made of. Go for it. Kill these beasts. Show them how fierce Earthlings are." The bayonet squad roared at the top of their lungs. Perhaps these residents were just ordinary people. Ordinary workers, white-collar employees, cooks, teachers, couriers, and delivery men during the day, performing mundane and tedious jobs. But on every night when the mist descended and monsters roamed, Dragon City had no city walls. They were the city walls. They were the warriors, the swords and shields, and the last line of defense between their families and the monsters. The black beetle swarm was still 100 meters away from the residents. Dragon City will be victorious. Li Daong drew his battle saber. Dragon City will be victorious. A flash of swords and blades shimmered. The black beetle swarm was now 80 meters away from the residents. Humanity will be victorious. Li Daong took out a pen-shaped syringe and stabbed it into his chest. Humanity will be victorious. The residents of the bayonet squad all took out burning potions, extracted from adrenaline, and injected them into their hearts. Accompanied by bursts of gasps, their muscles expanded at a visible rate. Thick blood vessels, like clawing dragons, coiled around their extremely robust bodies. The black beetle swarm was 60 meters away. Earth will be victorious. Li Daong looked up at the horizon. The night sky was shrouded in thick mist, and not a single star could be seen. But he could clearly see, on the distant shore of the Sea of Stars, the azure mother planet, shining like a brilliant blue crystal, watching over them. Earth will be victorious. The warriors raised their battle sabers one after another, letting the otherworld beasts see the light of Earth's civilization clearly. The black beetle swarm was only 30 meters away. Humanity could already see the monster's sharp and hideous features. In room 704, Meng Chao shouted, "Ah Chao, quickly take your mom, your sister and Grandma Wang and run. I can hold off this beast." "Dad, you can't do it alone. Let Mom and the others run first. The two of us will hold this place." Meng Chao grit his teeth. "Cut the crap. Don't get in the way here. This is a super beast, not something you can handle." Meng Chao said anxiously, "I know what this beast is." Meng Chao lowered his voice, his gaze cold. His eyes, filled with killing intent, locked firmly onto the ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle through the sight, smoke, and flames. This was the beast. In the memories of his past life, it was this beast that slaughtered many residents of Tianfu Garden. It seriously injured his mother and led his sister down a dark path. With only normal-level basic marksmanship, it was impossible to kill it. This time, I won't let you have your way. He had already shot and killed 9 flame black beetles and 4 flying flame beetles. Current basic marksmanship proficiency, 87%. Taking a deep breath of the scorching air, Meng Chao staked everything on one throw. Bang! 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 He turned the muzzle and shot toward the flame black beetles on the ground. These low-level creatures had already formed a dark tide of insects on the small square. Meng Chao didn't even need to aim. The bullets instantly peeled off the carapaces of several black beetles. Some unlucky ones were hit in their flammable mucus sacs and turned into fireballs. A sea of fire rose before Building 19. The strange fire before Meng Chao's eyes became even more magnificent. Killed a flame black beetle. Contribution point +1. Proficiency +1%, reaching 88%. Congratulations, Hopebearer. You have completed your first combat mission, Insect Hunter, and defended your civilization with powerful force. You have earned 1,500 contribution points and can upgrade any current basic skill by 1 level. Upgrade now? I must upgrade my basic marksmanship before this monster fully awakens. Meng Chao held his breath and continued his frenzied killing. Along with the whistling bullets, the flame black beetles exploded one after another. The strange fire before him blazed wildly. Proficiency +1%, proficiency +2%, proficiency +3%. Congratulations! Your normal-level basic marksmanship proficiency has reached 100%. Upgrading to expert level. As if receiving a divine revelation, all kinds of firearm-related information instantly appeared in his mind. Biological currents surged from his central nervous system all the way to his nerve endings, allowing every bundle of his muscle fibers to master a stronger marksmanship. Just then, a string of exceptionally distinct gunshots rang out from the residential building behind them. They failed to penetrate the carapace and instead completely enraged the super beast. The ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle was furious, letting out a screeching hiss as it searched for the source of the attack. The ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle swept above Meng Chao's unit building. Screech! The sharp hiss tore at the eardrums of all the residents. Meng Chao was startled. In his past life when the mist descended, it was by Jiao who, like a newborn calf unafraid of tigers, used this gun to fire a shot at a mysterious monster. This attracted the monster's attention, causing it to charge toward their home. Because his mother had difficulty moving her legs, she was seriously injured. Following this upheaval, he became irritable. At school, unable to endure the monitor's sarcasm, he finally got into a fierce fight with Zhuohaoren. At that time, how could he be a match for Zhuohaoren? He was injured by the monitor using an extremely insidious method. He didn't notice it at the time, but a few days before the high school graduation exam, his breathing became faint and painful, and his extreme punch force plummeted by 30%. Ultimately, by just a few points, he failed to even get into a vocational college. Bai Jiao blamed herself deeply, believing her mother's serious injury and her brother's failure in the high school graduation exam were both due to her recklessness. Perhaps it was this incident that became her heart's demon, becoming the starting point of her descent into becoming the Night Witch. At this time, the intense gunfire also attracted the attention of the ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle. The super beast turned 180 degrees, the golden powder on its wings shimmering. Its ghost eyes opened wider, and its terrifying aura became almost substantial as it locked firmly onto the window of Meng Chao's home. Crack! The reinforced glass could not withstand the impact of the super beast's aura, and web-like cracks appeared all over it. Whose home is that? Are they looking for death? On the ground, the bayonet squad also noticed the wrath of the super beast. Just now. Dump all contribution points into basic marksmanship and max out the proficiency. Meng Chao roared in his heart. Teaching the Mighty Bull technique earned over 30 contribution points, lowering his little sister's probability of becoming the knight, which earned 500. Completing the Insect Hunter mission earned 1,500. Adding them up, more than 2,000 contribution points were all poured into basic marksmanship. Proficiency suddenly skyrocketed. 15%, 26%, 48%, 55%, 78%, 99%. He felt his brain and hands burning. Countless memory fragments of firing a gun in his past life shone brilliantly, like burning meteors bombarding and firmly engraving themselves onto the cerebral cortex of his current life. Congratulations! Your expert-level basic marksmanship proficiency has reached 100%, upgrading to master-level. The crisp sound of a gunshot echoed in his mind, accompanied by a soul-tearing pain. Details 10 times richer than the expert level came flooding in. No, this was still not enough. Meng Chao clutched his burning head, feeling as if his brains were about to gush out of his 7 orifices. But he still grit his teeth and roared in the depths of his heart, "Now! I can redeem the reward for Insect Hunter. Upgrade Master Level Basic Marksmanship, 1 more level. Initial Combat Mission Reward confirmed. Congratulations! Your Basic Marksmanship has been upgraded from Master Level to Perfect Level. Basic Marksmanship. Perfect. Wow. In an instant, Meng Chao's brain almost exploded. An incomparably violent flow of information not only poured in all his past life shooting experience, but also seemed to include the shooting experience of hundreds of veterans who had died alongside him when Dragon City was destroyed. It almost turned into magma, about to shoot out from his 7 orifices. In addition to knowing how to fine-tune every bundle of muscle fiber, and even every single cell to perfectly master most ordinary firearms, hundreds of monster anatomical diagrams surfaced in his mind, including their weaknesses and the best way to fight them. Besides the ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle, he knew clearly about many monsters that people in Dragon City today had not even seen before. It was just as if his past life self had stood before an operating table and personally dissected countless monsters. This is the feeling. He endured the pain of his brain nearly gushing out and used his hands, which were about to catch fire, loading the last armor-piercing magazine. The moment the armor-piercing rounds whistled out, the muscles of his arms and shoulders also twitched reflexively, canceling out the recoil and making the trajectory more precise and stable. The armor-piercing rounds, engraved with runes and possessing the armor break effect, were wrapped and propelled by spirit energy. Surging out at speeds much faster than normal bullets, they tore through smoke and flames, piercing directly toward the right wing of the ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle. The bullet tore away a small half of the wing, making the ghost-eye pattern on the right side no longer complete, as if the creature had been disfigured. Meng Chao pulled the trigger again, another 3-round burst. The ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle flapped its wings violently, dodging by a hair's breadth. "Ah Chao, have you gone mad?" Meng Ishan roared. "Dad, believe me." Its mouth parts opened. A deep crimson fireball, nearly purple, was rapidly brewing. The super beast before him overlapped with the images in his nightmares. Meng Chao seemed to see how this beast rampaged, how it tore humans to shreds, how it burned the home where he had lived for 17 years to ashes, and how it harmed his mother, father, sister, himself, the neighbors, and everyone in Tianfu Garden. His eyeballs burned with pain, and a bullet-like glare erupted from the depths of his pupils. "In this life, die for me." Bang! Just as the super beast spat out the flames of destruction, the last armor-piercing round left the barrel. Basic marksmanship, perfect level, activated. Meng Chao and his gun were one. The light in his eyes and his will to kill were all wrapped around the bullet. The bullet instantly pierced through the void, accurately piercing the mouthparts of the ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle, detonating the fireball that had yet to be spat out. Boom! The mouthparts of the ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle suddenly exploded. The surrounding organs were blown to pieces, and a large spray of pale gold, viscous fluid erupted. Like a kite with its string cut, it fell powerlessly. Someone blew up the super beast. Inside the buildings and on the ground, countless residents let out ecstatic cries. The ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle was the commander of the monsters. With the commander fallen, the swarms were instantly leaderless. Not only did the flying flame beetles crash around like headless flies, but the surging insect tide also fragmented. The black beetles scurried like ants on a hot pan, shivering under the roars of humanity. What? Both Li Daong and the residents were greatly surprised. The fireballs spat by the super beast had ignited the building's facades. Although the armor wasn't afraid of burning, the smoke and fire made visibility near zero. Who fired that shot so accurately? Someone hit the super beast. The bullet seemed to be fired from our direction. I didn't expect our unit to have such an expert. It seems to be Building 19, Old Meng from Unit 3, Room 704. He was once a sharpshooter in the army. I didn't expect him to be so vigorous in his old age. Joint Defense Captain Li Daong was both surprised and delighted. He waved his battle saber and shouted at the top of his lungs. The monsters have collapsed. Residents, for Tianfu Garden, for Dragon City, for Earth, charge. The screaming bayonet squad pounced like hungry tigers on sheep, charging into the monster swarm. The hesitating black beetle swarms immediately fled in panic, their ranks in shambles, attempting to escape back into the depths of the mist. But the spatial cracks had already closed. They were like fish in a pot, with nowhere to run. In room 704, Meng Chao could hardly believe his eyes. The super beast was clearly blown up by a bullet fired from Building 19, but there was no better shooter here besides him. Could it be that in his desperation, he sprayed his submachine gun and achieved an extraordinary feat by pure luck? He faintly felt something was wrong, but couldn't put his finger on what was strange. Thud! A sound came from beside him. His son had slumped to the floor. Ah Chao! Meng Chao was pale with fright. He rushed forward to hold his son and found his skin scalding hot, as if he had a 40-degree fever. Every muscle in his body was twitching frantically. Meng Chao couldn't speak. His nosebleed gushed like a turned-on faucet. His brain felt like it had been crushed back and forth by a main battle tank. It hurt so much he wanted to cry. With a weak 17-year-old body, awakening so many past life memories in an instant, had his brain cells nearly bursting from the information tide. It was practically suicide. Fortunately, he won the bet with the last bullet. The previous 3-round burst was just a feint to make the ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle face him directly, exposing the only fatal weakness deep inside its mouthparts. Then he used the last armor-piercing round to interfere with the formation of the super beast's ultimate move, triggering a chain reaction that caused the spirit energy inside the creature to go completely out of control. It wasn't his bullet, but the super beast's own violent power that killed itself. This was called perfect. Meng Chao closed his eyes and found the images of the ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle rampaging through Tianfu Garden in his nightmares shattering, quickly fading and dissipating. Soon, they vanished with the wind. As expected, nightmares can be crushed, and the future can be changed. Fate in the end is in my own hands, he smiled in his heart. A sudden sweetness hit the tip of his tongue. It was by Jiaocao prying open his mouth and carefully pouring in medical medicine. Brother, don't you dare die. I haven't taken my revenge yet. No, I haven't repaid you yet. How can you just pass away like this? Wah! The little girl cried as if her heart were breaking. Who said I? Meng Chao opened his eyes weakly. Brother, are you okay? Bai Jiaocao broke into a smile through her tears and took the opportunity to pinch Meng Chao's face hard. How is it? Do you feel anything? Are you still conscious? Ow, ow, ow. Let go. As expected of the night witch, how evil. Ah Chao, are you all right? Dad, Mom, and Grandma Wang all looked at him with concern. For the moment, Meng Chao didn't know how to explain to everyone and was too tired to speak. He could only manage a thumbs up. I'm fine. Just a bit drained. Dad, you killed the super beast. That's amazing. Looking at his trembling and exhausted son, Meng Chao was asking him to hide the truth about his marksmanship. He thought for a moment, and also gave a thumbs up in front of Meng Chao's eyes. Meng Chao's eyes reddened. Son, you are also very amazing. Get some rest. We are all here, don't be afraid, the middle-aged man said with absolute seriousness. That's right. With me here, no other demons or ghosts can even think of bullying you. Bai Jiaocao added. This old lady won't talk nonsense either. Don't worry, Grandma Wang said. Meng Chao laughed, heh, and closed his eyes. A moment later, he snapped them open again. Something was wrong. If he had killed the ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle, why hadn't an information prompt popped up telling him how many contribution points he had earned? Could it be? Meng Chao's skin crawled. Ignoring the world spinning around him, he lunged toward the shooting hole under his family's cries. Sure enough, the ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle had crashed heavily onto the ground. Although golden fluid flowed all over the place, it wasn't dead. It was only in a state of suspended animation for a moment. As the golden liquid gradually solidified and the wound writhed and healed, its wings actually began to tremble slightly again. Not good. My body is still too weak, the dark injuries aren't healed yet, and I haven't mastered powerful spirit energy. Although he had the consciousness of perfect-level basic marksmanship and the past-life memories of monster weaknesses, the coordination between his brain and body wasn't synchronized. This would take a long time to break in. That shot just now had slight flaws in accuracy and timing. It actually failed to blow its head off. Meng Chao felt despair. Could it be that just as his sister would likely still turn black, fate is like a rushing river that cannot be changed by human effort? I will change it. He grit his teeth, his eyes bloodshot. Just as he was about to climb down to engage the super beast in melee, using the mighty bull technique. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning tore through the mist, stabbing straight down at the ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle. Swoosh! The ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle had just flown half a meter up before being firmly nailed back to the ground. The lightning surged as if hundreds of snow-bright sabers were simultaneously stabbing into the super beast's body, slashing every organ into pieces. The super beast let out a wail, and its carapace plates were electrocuted until they curled up. The flesh inside exploded one after another. It was completely dead. Not until the lightning dimmed did Meng Chao see that what had nailed it down was a 12-foot silver spear. The silver spear was coiled with a dragon, its tail trembling incessantly, letting out a proud hiss. A figure in white, like a deity descending from heaven, landed lightly on the spear's tail. A powerful aura instantly enveloped all of Tianfu Garden. Many low-level monsters were so intimidated they didn't dare move a muscle. Transcendent. All the residents were overjoyed, letting out cheers of survival. Meng Chao had still crushed the nightmare of Tianfu Garden. He delayed for the most critical 5 minutes, allowing the Transcendent to arrive in time before the Super Beast could cause tragic destruction. The information arrived belatedly. Assisted a Transcendent in killing a ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle. Played a key role. Contribution points plus 758. Performed outstandingly in the defense of Tianfu Garden. Made the greatest contribution to this community. Saved a large number of ordinary citizens. Dragon City has become stronger because of you. Contribution points plus 436. The ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle far exceeded the level you could handle. Congratulations to the Hope-Bearer for risking your life to overcome the strong as the weak. Once your deeds spread, they will inspire more ordinary citizens to follow your example and fight to the end for civilization. Additional contribution points, plus 899. Special Citizen by Jiatsao. The Night Witch, probability of blackening reduced by 1%. The future chaos of Dragon City has been reduced. Contribution points plus 500. Current contribution points, 2,478. Can awaken new basic skill, Dragon Snake Force, and auxiliary skill, Basic Harvesting. Nearly 2,500 contribution points shimmered, and several gray, yet to be awakened new skills appeared. Including the basic marksmanship that was upgraded to perfect level in one breath, the harvest was indeed rich. Meng Chao, however, was a bit dazed. He sat against the corner for a long time, muttering unwillingly, "Transcendent, huh?"
With the arrival of the Transcendent, the outcome was no longer in doubt. The battle ended within half an hour. Aside from 2 residents who accidentally broke their arms, there were no further casualties in Tianfu Garden. In the eyes of Dragon City people, such injuries could be resolved with a few band-aids. We won. We finally slaughtered these beasts. The Transcendent is awesome. Old Meng from Building 19 is also pretty awesome. He was the first to deal heavy damage to the Super Beast. As expected of a former army sharpshooter from 20 years ago. Stop arguing. In the end, Tianfu Garden is awesome, Dragon City is awesome, and we Earthlings are the most awesome. The shooting group and the bayonet squad flattered each other, while residents beamed with joy. The community was filled with a joyful atmosphere. Next came the much-anticipated harvesting phase, which wasn't much different from slaughtering pigs for the new year in the countryside during the Earth era. The crystal loudspeakers played the cheerful music of "Today is a good day." Men and women, young and old, joined in. Sharpening their knives, they began harvesting the monsters. Ordinary monsters all belonged to Tianfu Garden. Don't be fooled by the ugly appearance of the flame-black beetles. The lumps of flesh inside their shells were exceptionally delicious. Steamed and dipped in ginger vinegar, they tasted exactly like the hairy crabs from the Earth era. Just imagining the lumps of crab-like meat, the size of chicken drumsticks, made many residents drool. Moreover, the abundant mucus in their bodies was a high-quality fuel additive that could be sold for a lot of money. There was also the newly evolved ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle. Since it was its first appearance in Dragon City, it had high research value. Sent to the Monster Research Institute by the Transcendent, it would be exchanged for a large amount of cash, weapons, ammunition, and cultivation resources to be returned to Tianfu Garden. Meng Yishan, wearing a hazmat suit, anti-corrosion gloves and overshoes, brandished his butcher knife and scalpel. He looked both like a savage butcher and a crazed witch doctor. He was not only one of the best marksmen in Tianfu Garden, but also the strongest harvester, period. In fact, he was a professional. Whenever the mist descended and monsters swarmed out, he and a group of old brothers were hired by the Resource Recovery Company specifically to clean up the battlefield. Meng Chao was too exhausted, leaning on the balcony, watching the bustling labor scene. After injecting several vials of highly concentrated nutrient solution and clearing out all the compressed food at home, he finally regained his composure slightly. But he was still hungry. So hungry it felt like his stomach had been hit by a round from a main battle tank. The pain in his head hadn't subsided much either. After applying ice for half an hour until his teeth ached from the cold, he remained dazed with a dull, throbbing pain. Clutching his head and rubbing his stomach, he recalled the battle just now and pondered his next development plan. Since the ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle appeared, it means the monsters are constantly upgrading. The war is about to spin out of control. I must race against time to become stronger as quickly as possible. He thought for a long time and first confirmed one thing. The blurred past life memories should be a form of protection for his brain. Matter determines consciousness. Human brain cells are limited in number, and the capacity of memory cells is also limited. No one can clearly remember every detail and every skill of decades of life. It seems that only by becoming stronger through cultivation, and possessing more powerful brain cells and a central nervous system, will my past life memories continue to be released. Every time a small segment of memory and a skill are awakened, it feels like a splitting headache and leaves him famished. If decades of memories and hundreds of skills were awakened instantly, either his head would explode or his life force would be instantly drained dry. It's like my past life memories are encapsulated in slow-release capsules, being released bit by bit. Only then can they be safely absorbed by my brain and body. I wonder if this is a law of rebirth or the protection of the Kindling. Besides this, Meng Chao also discovered that mastering a perfect level skill doesn't mean it's truly perfect. It can only help him possess a perfect consciousness. The perfection, pushed out by using contribution points to boost proficiency, even if it can reach the nerve endings, still has many flaws. It needs to be constantly applied in actual combat to achieve a high degree of unity between consciousness and body. But without cultivation resources, I'm like a weak-legged shrimp all day. It takes me forever just to kill a single flame black beetle. How can I engage in practical combat? Circling around, it returned to the old problem. The family is poor. I have the kindling and past life memories, and my learning efficiency is much higher than others. Correspondingly, my consumption of cultivation resources is 3 to 5 times, or even more than that of ordinary classmates. Where will these resources come from? Relying solely on the study group to earn resources from classmates isn't a long-term solution. How much money can classmates have? If things get too exaggerated, the school won't allow it either. Meng Chao scratched his head in distress. Bro, they're harvesting bugs outside, don't you find it stinking? Below, the flame black beetles were being dismembered, and the pungent smell of flammable mucus filled the air. Suddenly, it felt somewhat familiar to him. The sight of his father wielding a butcher knife to hack monsters into pieces made his past life memory fragments shimmer again. That's it. Harvesting. Wait, I remember now. In my past life, I followed Dad as a harvester for 10 years. Meng Chao closed his eyes as images flickered across his mind. In his past life, his mother was heavily injured by a super beast, and he failed his high school graduation exam. To survive, pay for his mother's medical bills, and earn his sister's tuition, he was brought into the trade by his father. He had harvested countless fierce beasts during the monster war, and his skills had become quite decent. Harvesters, they seem to make quite a bit of money, don't they? The other world is saturated with spirit energy and various radiation sources. Living organisms have faster metabolisms, more active cells, and more unstable genes. It is very easy for them to mutate new organ forms and transcendent abilities. After death, they are also more prone to rot and spoil. Various ancient and mysterious pathogens multiply rapidly within the corpses, taking control of the unrotted nerve cords and muscle bundles. They turn the corpses into undead creatures like zombies, or even extremely dangerous biochemical bombs. Monster corpses are a precious resource for Dragon City's development. Under the shroud of the mist, they are even the only strategic resource, requiring race-against-time harvesting. Once organs mutate or materials decay, the harvested resources won't cover the cost of exterminating the monsters. Even if all monsters are killed, it's still a loss. Often, the strong fight selflessly, but once the fierce battle ends, the monster corpses either turn into undead creatures, requiring them to be killed all over again, or they rot so badly that all resources are wasted. Worse still, the corpses can swell 10 times their size and explode with a bang. This sprays mucus carrying deadly pathogens over 1,000 meters, polluting air and water sources, potentially triggering a plague. Over time, the auxiliary profession of harvester was born. They specialize in following the strong, racing against time to clean up the battlefield. They won't let a single drop of monster blood or a single piece of monster dung go to waste. For me, harvester is the best auxiliary profession at this stage. I can collect rare materials, expand my social circle to meet various powerhouses, and, being in a favored position, it's easier to obtain cultivation resources. Since I did it for 10 years in my past life, awakening and upgrading shouldn't be too expensive. Isn't it better to do something I'm familiar with? Thinking of this, Meng Chao unhesitatingly spent contribution points to awaken basic harvesting. The exchange price for the two newly appearing skills, Dragon Snake Force, was quite normal. But basic harvesting was very cheap. Whether it was Mighty Bull Force, Dragon Snake Force, or basic marksmanship, all required 2,000 to 3,000 contribution points to exchange. This was equivalent to mentoring 100 ordinary citizens or slaughtering 100 monsters. This price level was quite reasonable. But basic harvesting? It wasn't 3,000 or 2,000 or even 1,000. It was only 998. With a stabbing pain in his temples, his facial muscles began to twitch. A massive amount of detail surfaced from the depths of his brain. Harvesting methods for crustaceans, mammals, reptiles, flying monsters, along with intricate monster anatomical diagrams, extraction methods for the heart, liver, spleen, lungs, and kidneys, identification and collection methods for hundreds of types of mucus, acids, and venoms, various signs of corpse mutation, omens of a corpse turning into a biochemical bomb. There were also many memory fragments of him and his father harvesting together. Countless images overlapped, branding the rich experience of a veteran harvester onto his cerebral cortex. Pain and pleasure followed like a shadow. He couldn't help but stretch out his hands, gripping non-existent butcher knives and scalpels. His fingers danced lightly, splashing and harvesting to his heart's content. Meng Chao realized he had made the right choice. After spending 998 contribution points to awaken basic harvesting, he spent another 1,355 to break through normal level and surge into expert level. Next, expert level basic harvesting and perfect level basic marksmanship produced a kind of synergy effect. A massive amount of bizarre monster weaknesses and anatomical structures, new monsters unheard of in this era, exploded into his mind. Indeed, for a harvester, the most important thing is to understand the organs and structures of monsters. For an excellent marksman, it is also crucial to perceive their structure and weaknesses. These two skills are highly correlated. In my past life, it was precisely because I followed Dad as a harvester for 10 years and dissected tens of thousands of monsters, that I was later able to master perfect-level basic marksmanship and barely become a third-rate expert. Right now, most of the monsters in my past life memories haven't even evolved yet. Doesn't that mean when they appear, I will be the person in all of Dragon City who understands them best? Meng Chao grinned, and blood gushed from his nose again in a torrent. Meng Yishan returned home and hurriedly packed things to leave again. Sushin, the work downstairs is finished. Remember to go to the neighborhood office later to collect our family's share. They insisted the super beast was heavily damaged by me, so the portion of black beetle meat they gave us is quite large. This stuff doesn't keep well. Cook some for the two kids in the morning and have them take some to school. Xiao Chao, you two go to bed early. I'm heading to the North City battlefield. They're waiting for harvesting there. Meng Chao held his nose and stood up. Dad, I'm going with you. Meng Yishan was stunned. With my current condition, I might not do well in the high school graduation exam. Instead of just finding any random job, I'd rather bet on being a harvester. Meng Chao shrugged. Meng Yishan looked at his son's frail appearance and thought the boy most likely wouldn't get into university. If he didn't go to college, being a harvester was indeed the best job an ordinary person could find. The risk factor was naturally very high. The battlefield changes in an instant, and no one can guarantee that new monsters won't attack while collecting spoils. Some monsters have powerful vitality and can launch a fatal strike even when appearing long dead. Corpse mutation, toxic blood, acids, and deadly spores can all kill a harvester in an instant. But the flip side of high risk is high reward. Beyond the pay, years of contact with monster remains, being nourished by beast blood and crystal radiation, means the probability of awakening transcendent power is higher than in ordinary professions. Ever since his son was injured last year, although he always put on a brave face, how could Meng Yishan not see the loneliness in his heart? As a father, he had been agonizing over his son's future and had already spoken with the company leaders. All right, I'll take you to see it for yourself. After the day's battle, the old father saw his son's growth and made up his mind. Bro, are you really planning to be a harvester? At the doorstep, Bai Jiatsao grabbed her brother's hand and wouldn't let go. Seeing the little girl's face full of concern, a wave of warmth surged in Meng Chao's heart. After all, the bond between siblings is deep. Hearing her brother was going to do such dangerous work, even the knight which must be a bit worried, right? Then if you encounter another delicious monster like the black beetle, remember to bring some home, the little girl seriously urged. Meng Chao took a deep breath and thought, it's all my fault. I really shouldn't have held such high expectations for the Night Witch. The mist gradually dissipated, and the communication channels returned to clarity. The general situation on the North City battlefield was settled, and monster corpses were piled like mountains, needing harvesters to show their skills. Military trucks were already parked at the gates of various communities, with resource recovery logos painted on both sides. The father and son buckled themselves into the back with safety belts. Accompanied by the jolting of the truck as it crushed monster corpses, they sped toward North City. The further north they went, the thicker the mist became. The mutual erosion between Dragon City and the otherworld space grew more severe. Hideous monster corpses could be seen everywhere, like bizarre statues emitting a pungent odor. There were also crazily mutated trees and vines, all clinging to human buildings. In just a few short hours of growth, they had almost swallowed the structures, turning the reinforced concrete city into a lush primitive jungle. Meng Chao even saw a T-Rex-like giant beast with a hole blown through its chest by an anti-tank gun. Dark blue blood flowed all over the ground, yet it wasn't completely dead. Its blood-red maw filled with fangs still opened and closed. The explosion-proof tires crushed monster remains, making a crunching sound. The stench was like tentacles, penetrating the cabin. Even holding one's breath couldn't block it out, and it was blindingly sharp. They arrived at North City. The scent of gunpowder and blood hit their hearts in waves, one stronger than the last. In the distance, several buildings seemed to be screaming, as they stood half collapsed and half ablaze. By the light of the raging fires, Meng Chao saw several paralyzed six-legged crawling-type crystal battle tanks. Their thick armor had been easily torn open by the monster's bladed limbs. Many soldiers lay scattered inside the cabins, torn apart, while many others, pale-faced and missing limbs, received treatment in silence. The monster's fate was 10 times more wretched than the humans. Snakes, insects, rats, ants, jackals, wolves, tigers and leopards were all scorched into blackened husks or torn into mangled pieces. These monsters, crushed by the steel torrent, held virtually no value for harvesting. Though monsters were detestable, their corpses were Dragon City's only strategic resource. If everyone fought like the army, indiscriminately carpet bombing and grinding every monster into dust, it might feel satisfying, but it wasted massive amounts of ammunition and the precious lives of soldiers without reclaiming any benefits. Within 3 to 5 years, Dragon City's resources would be depleted, and they would starve or be trapped to death. Transcendents used cold weapons to slaughter thousands of monsters, keeping the corpses mostly intact. How much resource could be recovered depended entirely on the harvesters. No wonder the military was merely auxiliary in the fight against monsters these days. The key rested with the Transcendents. Ah Chao, Meng Yishan suddenly spoke. Being a harvester isn't easy. You need to be bold, meticulous and ruthless. Don't be nervous later, just watch and learn. Dad, I'm not nervous. How could you not be nervous? A real battlefield is a completely different concept from our community. Thousands of monsters, a mountain of corpses, a sea of blood. How can you not be nervous? Dad, I really am not nervous. If you're nervous, just say so. What's there to be afraid of between father and son? Back in the day, the first time your old man was a harvester, I saw so many monster corpses and smelled that pungent stench. I was so nervous I peed myself. Have you peed yet? I really haven't. Fine, I'm nervous I've peed. That's more like it. Let me tell you a secret. The first time you're a harvester, pad your crotch with a diaper. Seriously. The scent of many high-level monsters stimulates the human central nervous system. You just can't control your bladder. So, all the rookies wear diapers. Some wear them for years. Dad, it's the middle of the night, where am I going to get a diaper? Good son, look, what's this? When we get there, find a corner and put it on. I'll keep watch for you. It's not embarrassing. Dad, I suddenly have full confidence in the high school graduation exam. I'm not being a harvester anymore. Let me go home. No way. As they spoke, the jolting became violent. The truck stopped at the gates of Dragon City Steel Group. Many transcendents flew across the night sky like colorful meteors, continuing north to hunt down the retreating monsters. Harvesters were everywhere, working under different banners to divide work zones, racing against time. Meng Chao explained to his son, Manager Shen is a company leader. Whether or not you can be a harvester is up to him. Be smart. No, be honest. Later. Jushin Resource Recovery Company's general manager, Shen Rongfa, had a face shaped like the character Yu, with tiny eyes and large nostrils. Even though he didn't need to do manual labor, he wore a medical mask with the highest filtration rating and 3 layers of hazmat suits. Being short and chubby, he was drenched in sweat and kept blowing cool air next to the monster material refrigerated truck. Old Meng, last time you said if your son fails the high school graduation exam, he wants to intern at the company. But I heard he was injured, he asked in a pretentious tone. He had some minor injuries last year, but it's no longer an issue. This kid has had quick hands since he was little. If I train him personally, he'll definitely be a pro within 2 years. Meng Chao bowed, smiling humbly. Manager Shen, please help us out. Well, I'll help if I can, Shen Rongfa said noncommittally. But the company isn't mine. With your son's situation, it's hard for me to explain to my brother-in-law. I understand, that's why I'm asking for your help, Manager Shen. Meng Chao lowered his head almost to the ground and gripped Shen Rongfa's hand, sliding something in. Meng Chao's sharp eyes caught his dad, slipping a shopping card into Shen Rongfa's hand. The colorful monster patterns on the card looked like a consumption card from Golden Dragon Mall, a high-end shopping center in Dragon City that sold rare monster raw materials. Membership cards there required a minimum top-up of 10,000 yuan. In his past life, Meng Chao truly didn't know his job had been secured this way. His father, who usually wouldn't even smoke half a good cigarette and mended his underwear for years, actually had 10,000 yuan in private savings? Meng Chao narrowed his eyes, seriously considering whether to throw a sack over Shen Rongfa's head later in the dark and steal the card back. With the shopping cart in hand, Shen Rongfa's fat shook as he laughed. He patted Meng Chao's shoulder with a moist, hot hand. Fine. Your harvesting team is just affiliated with the company anyway. You can take whoever you want as an apprentice, it has nothing to do with the company. Just one thing. Don't cause trouble. It's fine if you cause me trouble, but it wouldn't be good to annoy my brother-in-law, right? Understood. We will never cause trouble for Manager Shen or Lord Tiger. Meng Chao nodded repeatedly and turned to pull his son over. Ah Chao, hurry up and thank Uncle Shen. Meng Chao took a deep breath, stepped forward and said, Thank you, Manager Shen. Shen Rongfa waved his hand impatiently. Enough talk. Hurry up and get to work. He patted his backside and went back to squat by the refrigerated truck to rest.